Get Out of Here Alive. Inner Alchemy and Immortality by Sol Luckman. Read by the author. Dedication. For my fellow riders on the storm. Preface. Thank you for getting off the beaten track enough to join me in entertaining, in a completely non-dogmatic way, the admittedly radical possibility that death doesn't have to be the end of life's journey. I realize this is a hefty proposition, and that extraordinary claims require extraordinary support. I can only hope that you find in these pages the inspiration and tools to stop looking outward for proof of important things, if you haven't already, and start or continue looking inward to decide for yourself if my concepts have merit. This book is especially for anyone who already qualifies as or is open to becoming a free thinker, defined by Merriam-Webster as one who forms opinions on the basis of reason independently of authority. I'd only add that in my dictionary, free thinking also involves, wherever possible, experientially trying on a concept before intellectually judging it. With that in mind, and with philosophical wrangling over mortality's inevitability aside, if you're willing to implement just some of the many empowering strategies and techniques herein, my sincere expectation is that your overall mind, body, spirit health will improve in obvious and even tangible ways, large and small. If you do derive benefit from, or otherwise wish to weigh in on, this book, I welcome your honest feedback in the form of a review and rating on Amazon, Goodreads, BookBub, and wherever else Get Out of Here Alive is sold that works for you. I also invite you to subscribe for free to my expanding self-help library for free thinkers, consciousness explorers, and wellness aficionados at solluckman.substack.com. There, with a complimentary 7-day trial, you'll have access to all my officially published books and some exclusive ones besides, and where available, their audio versions, including the audiobook of this text. Additionally, on that website, I've begun sharing a series of original exercises called Pragmalchemy for engaging in practical inner alchemy. If you're interested in taking your energy and focus to the next level, with ease and grace and some restorative self-body work added to the mix, you can seamlessly integrate these activities into your daily routine. Please accept my sincere gratitude once again for reading and contemplating the following chapters. Rest assured they build up to quite a stunning and inspirational denouement, so be sure to ride this ride all the way to the end. Epigraph. For the alchemist, the one primarily in need of redemption is not man, but the deity who is lost and sleeping in matter. C.G. Jung. Introspection does not need to be a still life. It can be an active alchemy. Anais Nin. Death is the midwife of very great things. It brings about the birth and rebirth of forms 1,000 times improved. Paracelsus. Introduction. Rest in peace. Death? Opening the doors of perception. It's hardly surprising that one of the most iconic and best-selling musician biographies of all time, and the first of a veritable Spanish caravan, written about the Doors frontman Jim Morrison, was titled "No One Here Gets Out Alive." The lyric is a line from 5 to 1, a perennial fan favorite penned by Morrison but credited officially to the Doors. And it is stuck in my mind, as it has in countless others over more than half a century since its 1968 release, like a splinter, to reference the movie The Matrix, that also figures prominently in this book. When I was living in Paris in the early 1990s, I became obsessed with Morrison, and not just his music, but his often macabre poetry as well. This was shortly after the release of Oliver Stone's uber provocative rock biopic that put to shame all other rock biopics, The Doors. As a birthday present, my girlfriend gave me a bilingual copy of The Lords and the New Creatures, Morrison's first volume of poetry, replete with dark meditations on sex, celebrity, drugs, and, of course, death. While riding the metro, sitting on the steps of Montmartre, and sipping espresso at cafes, I found myself reading it alternately in English and the French translation to capture more and more nuances of Morrison's cryptic, multi-layered thought. Jim had died in Paris and was buried in the city's famously lovely necropolis, Père Lachaise Cemetery. His grave, which once featured a stone bust with his big hippie hair made by a Croatian sculptor and stolen in 1988, was, and still is, a literal shrine to many tourists, fans, and hipster locals making rock and roll pilgrimages from near and far. Practically as controversial in death as in life, ever since his untimely demise in 1971 that rocked the rock world, Morrison has lingered in a sort of public half-life. Simultaneously, he has been an inspiration for counterculture and music lovers, a nuisance for Parisians fed up with the incessant drinking, smoking, and carousing that have turned his grave into an eternal party, and a would-be prodigal son to his home country, where a Florida politician bizarrely and unsuccessfully sought to have Jim's final resting place relocated to his birthplace, the Space Coast. My girlfriend, call her Kate, and I regularly visited Morrison's final resting place and often partook in the festivities, which I must admit were exemplary displays of Dionysian behavior, if inevitably a regretted hangover source. Filled with more cemeteries, church crypts, and bone-lined catacombs than you could shake a Gauloise at, Paris invited an ongoing meditation on the afterlife. Like Harry Potter's Myrtle without the moaning, I regularly found myself contemplating the seeming inevitability of death. And then one overcast Parisian winter afternoon, half a decade later, when I was back in town visiting a new girlfriend, while standing in front of Morrison's grave strewn with flowers and cigarette butts yet again as if no time had elapsed and nothing had changed, the doors of my perception, hat tipped to William Blake and Aldous Huxley, suddenly burst wide open when a still, small voice inside me asked this simply disarming question: does no one here get out alive? Might there be an alternative to death? That splinter of a question would ever after irritate my gray matter with a curious itch I couldn't scratch. Known as the Lizard King, a double-edged epithet if ever there was one, Morrison was infamous for his fascination with all things shamanic and mystical, an interest that undoubtedly informed his own obsession with mortality. Not long after my last visit to Paris, suffering from a mysterious and debilitating autoimmune illness with elements of chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, I embarked on my own healing journey through the valley of the shadow of death. I've written extensively about this shamanic phase of mine in my second book on the Regenetics method, Potentiate Your DNA. Regenetics is a powerful sound healing technique that ultimately restored my health, that I developed with my life partner, Lee. I'll have a great deal more to say about this work in relation to the critically important subject of energy preservation and cultivation in a later chapter. During this transformational period, as I sought to heal my wounded body, mind, and spirit, I began extensively studying shamanism, mysticism, alchemy, physics, epigenetics, and many other disciplines. This information slowly but surely wove itself together into a very different conceptual fabric from the comparatively more normy one to which I was accustomed. Out of this novel inner tapestry emerged my initial book on regenetics, conscious healing, in which I first examined the fringe notion that there might just be an alternative to death and dying. In my most recent book, The World Cult and You, Your Place in It and Your Way Out of It, in which regenetics played a comparatively minor role, my questioning of death's unavoidability went even deeper. This book you're reading is a continuation of that examination, with a new and vastly expanded emphasis on shamanic and alchemical concepts and processes that have everything to do with the most straightforward, and maybe only, way of getting out of here alive. I'll clarify exactly what I mean by alive in due course. Trust me, it's pretty cool, even if it may not be exactly what you expect. For the time being, let me assure you that the territory I'll cover offers an absolutely fascinating vista into the undiscovered country of the beyond. Long before discussing the ultimate and optional hero's journey into the great unknown, however, the material I'll be sharing through much of this book is designed to improve your life today in a myriad of subtle and not so subtle ways, even as your consciousness is prepped for much greater possibilities of worldly transcendence. What is this place? Before we go further into a discussion of getting out of here, let's take a moment to define what is meant by here. What is the nature of this confusing way station between birth and, usually, death, accompanied by obliteration of identity we call home? Planet, plane, simulation, hallucination, hell, heaven on earth. The hypotheses as to this realm's true character are as many as there are bored conspiracy theorists tapping away on crusty laptops in their parents' basements. But what if the childishly simple answer to our conundrum is given away in this aphorism popularized in Row, Row, Row Your Boat? Life is but a dream. In the world of adult literature, perhaps Edgar Allan Poe phrased it best. All that we see or seem is but a dream within a dream. Poe's haunting poem has long acted like yet another splinter aggravating my mind, challenging my accepted notions of this matrix-like reality. Are we truly awake while experiencing the tangible world around us? Or are we adrift in a dream flux of illusions, our senses hoodwinking us at every turn? The boundary between dreams and reality gets muddy indeed when we consider the nature of our perceptions. Our senses, those windows to the world, are far from perfect instruments that are extremely susceptible to manipulation and misinterpretation. What we perceive as unquestionably solid and real could be nothing more than smoke and mirrors, projections of our own psyches. The very act of doubting our reality indicates a flicker of suspicion, a seed of uncertainty germinating in our subconscious. Perhaps this nagging sense of unease, this wondering if something isn't altogether as it should be, is a clue, a whisper from the wellspring of our being that there's more to this existence than meets the eye. Imagine for a moment that our waking life is truly but a dream, a meticulously crafted simulation of sorts, designed to test the limits of our perception and self-awareness. What if the world we inhabit, with all its confounding complexities and contradictions, is nothing more than an elaborate stage set, a grand illusion orchestrated by a poorly understood force? If this were true, how could we possibly know for certain What signs or signals might betray the actual nature of our world and our place in it? The answer, perhaps, lies in the anomalies, the glitches in the matrix, those bizarre instances when the veil of perception momentarily slips and we catch a glimpse of the machinery behind reality's curtain. A sudden sense of deja vu, a feeling of being secretly observed, a recurring dream that seems eerily factual. What if these aren't the misfirings of our own warped brains, random occurrences with no deeper meaning? What if they're actually subtle hints, whispers from the multiverse urging us to question our reality? The trope of reality as an illusion definitely isn't a modern development. Philosophers and writers throughout history have endeavored to crack this tough nut, relentlessly probing the nature of existence and the limits of human perception. Plato's allegory of the cave, for example, compares us to prisoners relegated to an abyss, mistaking shadows on the wall for the real thing. Similarly, Rene Descartes' famous dictum, "I think, therefore I am," highlights the fundamental problem of certainty. If our senses can so easily deceive us, how can we be confident in our understanding of anything, even our own physical existence? Literature, too, is replete with stories of characters who question their sanity, their grasp on reality maddeningly unraveling as they delve deeper into the mysteries of their own tormented minds. From Poe's spooky tales to the psychological thrillers of modern fiction, the theme of dream versus reality continues to rivet and disturb. If we're indeed, like Neo in The Matrix, living in a dream world, the inevitable questions then become, can we wake up? If so, how do we wake up? What exactly awaits us if and when we do wake up? The possibility of waking up from, or even in, the dream offers a glimmer of hope, a sense that there's more to existence than this mundane rat race. It suggests that we're not just NPCs, non player characters in a pre programmed reality, but that instead we're capable of becoming truly conscious players with the power to shape our own destinies. Out through the in door. Shamanism and inner alchemy offer some of the most empowering strategies for free thinkers and other free spirits interested in waking up enough to craft their own storyline and direct their own fate. Not surprisingly, both disciplines firmly agree with what I've been saying in my own related work for some time now. The only way out is in. To reverse the title of another iconic rock masterpiece, this one by Led Zeppelin of Stairway to Heaven fame, we can say, without reservation, that to exit the matrix of this dreamscape, we must go out through the in door. Energetically speaking, this statement is meant to be taken almost literally. To transcend this place, whatever, wherever, and whenever it is, we must first travel inward through the wrinkles and folds of our own conscious, subconscious, and unconscious minds. In doing so, while utilizing specific techniques I'll outline, it's possible to amass enough energy or personal power to fly outward beyond the confines of this reality construct with our consciousness intact. In other words, though there are no guarantees in life or death, we at least have a shot, a fool's chance maybe, but a shot, nevertheless, at getting out of here alive. I get that some readers of a skeptical or cynical bent will find the notion of cheating death and becoming immortal nothing but fool's gold. To whom I say, if you're going to be a fool, you'd better do it right. Being a fool the right way means not being the kind of fool who uncritically accepts so-called real world truths that attempt to explain away the inexplicable, while unthinkingly denying huge swaths of data that contradict those very truths. The wrong type of fool focuses only on the profound while sweeping the absurd under the rug. The right kind, however, realizes that profound and absurd don't exist in isolation, but as a meaningful paradox at the center of human experience, the absurdly profound. Shedding light on a similar subject, F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote, "The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function." For anyone desiring to go beyond this world's illusory limits, the most important thing is to avoid accepting anything anyone, including yours truly, asserts as fact, without personally testing it with an open mind and heart. I encourage you to, at least as an experiment, stop listening to the mouthpieces of the world and see for yourself whether my words have any substance. That means getting in touch with your inner shaman and committing to alchemically transforming the lead of your current diminished reality into the gold of your total expansive self. Even if, heaven forbid, you fail in your attempt to blow this popsicle stand while giving a single finger salute to the Grim Reaper, the lifestyle recommendations, thought experiments, and energy enhancing protocols I share in this book can dramatically improve your quality of life during whatever time you have left. This upgrade can include rejuvenation, increased energy, a better mental outlook, more balanced emotions, greater abundance, a renewed sense of purpose, and even physical healing. So, what are we waiting for? Onward and inward. Chapter 1: The Hero's Journey Past the Dragon, Through the Shadow, and into the Dark Sea of Awareness. Stop acting so small. You are the universe in ecstatic motion. Rumi. The Quantum Dance. The world appears substantial. We bump into things and each other. We feel the rain and would swear on our mother's grave we're encountering a collection of material drops. To say otherwise invites cynical laughter and derision. Yet quantum physics, the study of the universe at its most minute level, unveils a startlingly different picture from what today's hyper-materialist humans so glibly dub reality. This may be old hat to some, but in the quantum realm, the things we take for granted aren't really things at all. In other words, they're not solid. There is, to adapt a phrase I adore and often cite, attributed to Gertrude Stein, simply no there. Even those of us who understand some of the scientific theories behind this concept often only pay lip service to it, believing one thing, reality isn't solid, while acting with cognitive dissonance based on a diametrically opposed belief. Reality is hard and immutable. Nevertheless, it can be shown, intuited, and eventually even seen with the inner senses that this world is nothing more or less than an intricate dance of energy, a sea of swirling possibilities where everything is constantly in flux. Seers and mystics, in fact, sometimes refer to this foundational realm out of which the movie of our lives momentarily projects as the dark sea of awareness, a term I first encountered in the shamanic work of Carlos Castaneda, and which has more recently informed John Kreiter's groundbreaking contemporary revelation of the ancient mysteries of alchemy. Atoms The building blocks of so called matter, however much they might seem to be physically circumscribed, aren't actually like tiny billiard balls. That's kindergarten science. From a shamanic or alchemical perspective, atoms are more like sentient waves, their intelligently responsive existence a blur of potential until they magically appear to materialize. Mimetic desire and belief manipulation. There is, of course, a method to the multiverse's creative madness, an order and energetic methodology behind what appears to be pure chaos. From a human perspective, as Kreider observes in the magnum opus, beliefs are the underlying structures that shape our lives. They create and give direction to thoughts and ideas, and these thoughts trigger or induce emotions that then naturally propel raw and very powerful energy through and around the body and into the environment at large. While this may sound all well and good, there's a sobering pitfall to the way we go about imagining our world. Through a process known as mimetic desire, which leads people to assign value based not on direct experience, but through imitation of what others appear to desire, beliefs can be conditioned and even installed in the human psyche. As French philosopher René Girard explained in his influential mimetic theory, man is the creature who does not know what to desire, and he turns to others in order to make up his mind. We desire what others desire because we imitate their desires. The upshot is that the world brought into being by people through their installed belief systems can be manipulated by anyone or anything powerful and knowledgeable enough to pull the right emotional strings to produce the desired beliefs. In my previous book, The World, Cult, and You, I spent a lot of time on the subject of what some have called the tyranny of belief. This phrase can refer to the control and manipulation of the human herd through society wide implementation of both laughably obvious and cleverly camouflaged forms of indoctrination. To use George Orwell's famous term, we're talking about groupthink, which Wikipedia describes as a psychological phenomenon that occurs within a group of people in which the desire for harmony or conformity in the group results in irrational or dysfunctional decision making. The desire for cohesiveness in a group may produce a tendency among its members to agree at all costs. This causes the group to minimize conflict and reach a consensus decision without critical evaluation. The key takeaway is that society's members are psychically pressured into defining true and right based not on personal experience or direct gnosis, inner knowing, but on what the creators of social discourse put forward as true and right. In other words, what to believe in, even in the absence of genuine logic or compelling evidence. This situation leads, almost inevitably it would seem, to the creation of a certain kind of top-down pyramidal structure that controls society, culture, and, given enough free rein, eventually the world itself. I'll return to the massively important and almost completely ignored, due to social engineering, topic of mental reality installations a bit later. But for now, let's observe the observer effect. The oft-discussed observer effect, based on the so-called particle-wave duality, made famous by numerous researchers conducting double-slit experiments, isn't a negligible phenomenon. To the contrary, the observer effect applies to far more than just photons appearing as particles or waves, depending on whether an observer happens to be around to coalesce them with the power of attention. Doing this with light is just a cheap party trick, like pulling a rabbit, a particle, out of the infinite probability waves of the quantum soup. the dark sea of awareness. But things can get way more intriguing. As evidenced by such minutely scrutinized paranormal phenomena as tulpas and egregores, the really jaw dropping magic happens when, knowingly or otherwise, we use our focus to collapse waves into actual matter. A notion deriving from Tibetan Buddhism, a tulpa is said to be a thought form materialization, often taking human shape and serving as a helper or servitor, generated by way of consistently applied intention and attention. Similarly, an egregore, we read in Wikipedia, is a non physical entity that arises from the collective thoughts of a distinct group of people. The concept has referred to a psychic manifestation or a thought form, which occurs when any group shares a common motivation, being made up of and influencing the thoughts of the group. Leaving aside the many connections between such thought forms and reality installations that form and inform groupthink and related behaviors, let's cut to the chase about the larger implications of such phenomena. Not to put too fine a point on it, but the documented existence of tulpas and egregores, both of which have often been witnessed by multiple individuals simultaneously, strongly suggests, in John Rappaport's emphatic words, that the universe is a product of mind. Indeed, one could argue that the observer effect is the primary energetic dynamic of reality itself. This effect showcases the eminently malleable nature of the Lego pieces of our world, atoms, as material objects that appear to become so only through an act of creative focus. This may strain credulity, but at the fundamental level of energy, it's just how things are. The human gaze is so potent, in fact, it can actually be felt with our sixth sense, what I think of as the psychic one, as biochemist Rupert Sheldrake redundantly demonstrates in The Sense of Being Stared At. Mind over matter. The observer effect puts our everyday perceptions and assumptions in a blender. It dictates if we're to be honest with ourselves, sober in our thinking, and not reactionary in our emotions, that the world we see is not the ultimate reality, but merely a projection of it. From this perspective, the manifest world is revealed as what Hindu mystics refer to as Maya, illusion, the imaginal outpourings of minds, like children naturally playing in magical constructs that seem eminently real, simply doing what minds do. In the words of physicist Arthur Stanley Eddington, the mind stuff of the world is, of course, something more general than our individual conscious minds. It is difficult for the matter-of-fact physicist to accept the view that the substratum of everything is of mental character. But no one can deny that mind is the first and most direct thing in our experience, and all else is remote inference. Contrary to the dogma downloaded from our many cult-like institutions of higher, actually lower, learning, we are not in any way separate from this quantum dance of the imagination. We're inextricably bound up in it. In a mind-melting paradox, we somehow manage to give rise to the quantum dance, even as it dances us. We're like the mythical Ouroboros, the serpent consuming its own tail, a stylized image of which I've placed at the end of each chapter herein, to remind us of our absurdly profound and infinite nature. As we learn to appreciate the waltz of shadows on the walls of Plato's cave, we begin to grasp that the solid objects we think of as ourselves are merely illusions moving through a greater illusion. Only then can we begin to get real, as it slowly dawns on us that objectivity is a subjective fantasy implanted in us by an external will seeking to curtail our creativity by limiting our minds to our own detriment. As I mentioned in the introduction, it's possible to become so real, so energetically sovereign, so full of power and magic, that we can grow wings, figuratively anyway, and fly this chicken coop. In other words, we can leave this delusional world and the world cult that sustains it, flapping in the breeze, while exiting as increasingly self realized beings. Few will even attempt this feat of alchemical transmutation, I realize. But at the very least, we can get real in our understanding, or better, understanding, as we begin to collect the scattered fragments of ourselves we've left behind in our unconsciousness. As I'll discuss in due course, shamanic recapitulation, inner alchemy, and my own powerful form of inner genetic work, the regenetics method, are extremely useful tools in this internal process of awakening, and perhaps eventually becoming our whole, authentic selves. A critical piece of this holistic self becoming involves the deeply felt realization that our thoughts, beliefs, and intentions aren't merely mental or just imaginary events. On the contrary, they're potent forces interacting synergistically with the quantum field, the biofield of the universal mind, if you will. In a culture crafted by eager yes men and women to an overbearing materialism, this may be a hard pill to swallow. But that doesn't change this clear, to many anyway, dynamic. The simply powerful act of observation influences the universe at its most basic level. How far does this go? Might it go all the way? Could it be not just a micro, but a macro effect as well? I think so. What we focus on, what we believe, has a direct effect on the unfolding of actual events. Small ones, yes, but large ones as well. Indeed, our sustained focus is the primary driver in bringing what are initially purely imagined scenarios, some on an expanded scale, to life. At the micro end of the spectrum, this even applies to our genes. These can be switched on and off consciously through intentional application of our awareness, as Dr. Bruce Lipton has shown in his inspiring research in the emerging science of epigenetics. Epigenetics reveals that your body isn't a genetically predetermined flesh robot, but a set of gene switches that can be turned on or off by you mindfully. Ergo, our genes aren't our destiny. We have far more control over their expression than most ever imagined. This isn't mere philosophical musing we're engaging in here. Epigenetic effects are strongly backed by experiments, repeated ones in many cases, which show its great power to improve health and well being through the exercise of conscious intention and attention. Whether we like it or not, we're walking placebo and nocebo generators, able to create health miracles or disasters, usually without even realizing we're the ones doing so, practically in the blink of an eye. Change is an inside job. Meanwhile, looking around us at the social landscape, it could hardly be more apparent that history is a sad testament to the limitations of external change or changing things from the outside. A dime a dozen and almost invariably overrated in hindsight. Countless revolutions, insurgencies, wars, conflicts, struggles, and social movements have stubbornly and blindly sought to create a better world. Yet true, lasting transformation remains elusive at the groupthink level. We grapple with the same issues generation after generation in this hamster wheel called reality. Why is external change so damn challenging? Because, I contend, to echo Henry David Thoreau's celebrated quote about the branches and roots of evil, pursuing external change only addresses symptoms, not the deeper cause. The world we see out there is a reflection of our cleverly molded shared consciousness, our collective belief installed through manipulation of our mimetic desire, not a given thing that can't be changed. This means, as in the adage, that we can heal the world only if we heal ourselves. By succumbing to external conditioning and looking outside ourselves for answers, thus denying the power of our imagination and ignoring the only viable path forward into the future, that of internal transformation, we're bound to just keep pouring gasoline on a world already on fire. As Carl Jung wisely observed in his meditations on the shadow, whatever is rejected from the self appears in the world as an event. The world can most definitely be changed, but not by using the materialist ways we've been taught, designed to keep us beating our heads against the walls and bars of the real world. To change this designedly dysfunctional construct, which our own co opted creative attention is actually responsible for materializing and maintaining, we must first change ourselves. Neville Goddard, a true pioneer of creative consciousness, said it best: "Stop trying to change the world, since it is only the mirror. Man's attempt to change the world by force is as fruitless as breaking a mirror in the hope of changing his face. Leave the mirror and change your face. Leave the world alone and change your conceptions of yourself. The reflection then will be satisfactory." We must then shift our perceptions, beliefs, intentions, and emotions. We must harness the power of the observer effect to induce a quantum change in the observed world. We must return to our center and resurrect our innate ability to perform miracles with only the tool of our consciousness. This is true magic, not something out of Hogwarts. We're more than capable of waving our wands over the manifest world and making its madness disappear. But first, we have to realize that we're born wizards, each and every one of us. There are no muggles here. The Hero's Journey. Another movie that provides a powerful metaphor for this book, as mentioned, is The Matrix. I'm referencing in particular the first installment of this franchise, whose liberating message appeared to have been, as typically happens, doomed from the start to be hijacked by its follow-ups crawling with hidden agendas. Neo's iconic story in the first movie depicts a world where reality is a computer simulation, a prison for the mind. The characters must choose to take the blue pill and remain in blissful ignorance, or swallow the red one and face the truth, however unsettling. If you're unaware of this famous plot line that has inspired a million memes, you obviously took the blue pill. We too live in a sort of matrix, one of our own manipulated mental making. Here it's worth repeating that our emotions, thoughts, and beliefs are the raw power that can be focused to create our experience of reality. To begin breaking free, individually, before even so much as contemplating doing this collectively, we must stop taking the black pill of skepticism and down the red pill of introspection. Only then, by exercising our will, can we resist the temptation to deny our true potential using the blue pill and instead graduate to the white pill of transcendence. Less poetically, our task is to confront the limitations of our own belief systems and the resultant intellectual constructs, and dismantle the bars and wires of our self-imposed prison. To do this requires looking inside as responsible agents of change, not outside as victims of a world beyond our control. The hero's journey, a narrative archetype found in myths and stories across cultures, popularized by comparative mythologist Joseph Campbell, provides a roadmap for this inner transformation. The heroic quest typically highlights a seemingly average person, think Thomas Anderson before he becomes Neo, who embarks on a perilous undertaking, confronts challenges and temptations, and ultimately returns to his or her starting place, transformed and usually upgraded. This myth appears central to human experience. The tarot, for example, which reads as a distillation of ancient mythology, is in essence about the heroic quest to become one's true self. Even the parable of the prodigal son can be interpreted as a retelling of the hero's journey. As you might expect by now, this journey isn't merely external, it's primarily internal. The hero's journey, applied to our matrix analogy, suggests that the only way out of the so called simulation is into oneself. The hero's ultimate inner battle is against the enemy within, the shadow self, our own agent Smith, the unrecognized and unintegrated aspects of the psyche that only battle and hinder us until we make peace with them. There's also the small matter of a dangerous dragon, a literal monster, guarding the entrance to our internal cave, which we must face and defeat to achieve liberation from the Matrix. But more on that later. By standing up to our fears, examining our darkness, and reassembling our fragmented selves, we undergo a profound metamorphosis, provided we're up to the challenge of seeing the world for what it is, a product of our own projections that have been manipulated for something else's benefit. As we embark on this challenging yet transformational inner journey, we tap into the quantum self, the infinite potential that resides within. We come to realize that we're not victims of circumstance, but conscious creators with the power to literally change the world, or at least our world, by altering our worldview. Our own reclaimed beliefs, which are more like deep knowings based on direct personal experience instead of mimetic desire, are some of the primary tools that we employ as increasingly conscious architects of our own experience. By cultivating awareness while following our bliss and learning to work with and eventually see the energy of the dark sea of awareness, and aligning our intentions with our most absurdly profound gnosis of how the universe actually works and where we fit into it, we become powerful change agents indeed. As David Hawkins demonstrated in Power versus Force, we influence the quantum field not through force, but through purposeful, conscious resonance with all that is, including all that we are. The hero's journey is, in the final analysis, the shamans, the alchemists, the wizards, and it's all about energy. Power up and hold on tight as you transform into more and more of the miraculous creature you've always been. In the immortal words of W.B. Yeats, the world is full of magic things, patiently waiting for your senses to grow sharper. As we become more energetically empowered, we transmute into living embodiments of the world we wish to see, radiating our signature creative passions into the fabric of existence and inviting a new and better expression of that fabric in the here and now. Thank you for walking beside me as I share various methods to engage and succeed in your own hero's journey. We'll examine everything from simplicity and dancing to the nature of the dragon, the shadow, and the infinite world of possibilities awaiting our exploration beyond. Chapter 2. What do you have to show for your life? Anything you cannot relinquish when it has outlived its usefulness possesses you. And in this materialistic age, a great many of us are possessed by our possessions. Peace Pilgrim. Complexity is the simplicity killer. Are you one of those people who crave to drink so deeply of life, to suck all its marrow out, to use Thoreau's mouth-watering phrasing, that you run around like a headless chicken dying of thirst in a spiritual desert? Are you aware of the energetic nature of all you choose to experience? How it impacts you and daily shapes the course of your life? Or do you feel that someone or something else is secretly directing you, perhaps even covertly draining your vital force? There are many pandemics in today's world, some less purely imaginary than others. And of these, the pathological need for ever increasing complexity nears the top of the list. Are apps here to make life simpler or more complicated? Are you working remotely or being worked remotely? Who's in control here? You or forces seemingly beyond your control? Fear is the mind killer, Frank Herbert famously wrote in Dune. He might also have truthfully stated that complexity is the simplicity killer, which is a crying shame because simplicity, absent any other changes in our way of life, can be a bona fide lucky charm for longevity and good health. Contrary to the indoctrinated notion that reducing existence to the essentials is for halfwits and losers in this golden age of technological progress, simplicity isn't simplistic, or at least it doesn't have to be. Simplicity can be a sophisticated lifestyle choice, the result of a decision to turn on, tune in, drop out. This famous turn of phrase by Harvard psychologist and countercultural icon Timothy Leary, called by President Richard Nixon the most dangerous man in America for his advocacy of psychedelics, infamously reimagined Thoreau's comparatively domesticated meme of marching to the beat of one's own drummer. In one form or another, whether approached conservatively or with a more radical edge, simplicity is non-negotiable. It's basically a requirement for those desiring to undertake the inner hero's journey of shadow work in order to move beyond the mimetic mind control of the dragon into the limitless creative possibilities of the dark sea of awareness. Think about it. How can you expect to go in where thorough and lasting change can only happen if you're always busy chasing loose and fake change outside yourself in the quote unquote real world? My advice may seem like tough love, but the only solution I can see is to stop making your life so bustling and Byzantine, so frantic and fragmented. Find time as often as possible to simply stop everything. By doing so on a regular basis, you might even be able to stop the world, to borrow a well-known concept from Carlos Castaneda, in order to perceive the true quantum reality behind physical reality directly. In terms of shamanic or alchemical transformation, if you're always obsessed about something out there, you'll never become anything in there where it actually counts. As for getting out of here alive, when you're up to your eyeballs following the dragon's breadcrumb trail of empty distractions, forget it. The road less traveled. You know you've lost your simplicity when you've found your busyness. A packed schedule is a telltale sign of decenteredness. If you're always having to squeeze people in, you'll be hard-pressed to get out of the kiddie pool of this construct and enter the deeper waters of the dark sea of awareness. Goal-oriented behavior is slickly marketed in this externalizing age, material success being the name of the game here in the desert of the real, to reference Morpheus cribbing Jean Baudrillard. All the while, our personal and collective stress over getting shit done depletes, harms, and even kills. But some individuals, in the true sense of having individuated, have learned to live magnificently without chasing the socially imposed carrot of riches and rewards with all of its collateral damage. These people made a conscious decision to take the road less traveled, to borrow a beloved phrase from the poetry of Robert Frost. And they provided much slow food for thought for those of us likewise in the process of ditching the fast food mentality of contemporary culture. Born Mildred Lisette Norman, and later adopting her famous moniker, Peace Pilgrim grew out of her early flapper phase of frenetic social engagement to become a well-known American spiritual teacher and peace activist. the first woman to walk the full length of the Appalachian Trail in a single season. By 1964, carrying only a toothbrush, comb, pen, and map, she had walked 25,000 miles to bring attention to, among other things, the lost, life-giving art of simplicity in a world dying, figuratively and literally, of over-complexity. By today's social media enforced standards, she might easily be considered a simpleton. Yet how many of those sitting comfortably in virtual judgment could or would live such a meaningful and memorable life replete with genuine challenges, large and small? Indeed, how many of those all too happy to judge simpletons today could even comprehend that intentional simplicity might be a far more satisfying and enriching lifestyle than their own frenzied, narcissistic pursuit of satisfaction and wealth? Let me be clear that I'm not judging desire per se. One's motivation to live simply is itself a form of desire. We can't escape desire, nor should we try to, in my opinion. But I do wish to point out that desire, like a laser on a swivel, can be redirected from the outside to the inside, with astonishing results of a magical nature when focused on healing, transformation, and transcendence. Thoreau less traveled. On the subject of excelling in the unbridled territory surrounding the cozy confines of the norm, the famous transcendentalist stands out as another titanic American simpleton who pairs well with Peace Pilgrim. Many literary scholars and historians consider Thoreau to be one of America's greatest philosophers, if not writers. So I take what he had to say on one of his favorite subjects, the importance of simplicity, which to him was like the salt of the earth, with more than a grain of salt. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, he wrote in one of the most iconic passages in Western literature. To front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. He continued, I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear. Nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. How many in our busy, complex, mostly online world would or could write, much less undertake, such a meaningful passage? How many of those running around today with their heads on fire could even contemplate such thoughts? Thoreau is, in his own inimitable way, describing his personal hero's journey beyond the illusions and distractions of this construct. His aim is to reduce life to its essential ingredients in order to study them not just artistically, but also, there's not a better word for it, scientifically. He definitely put his money, what little he had or needed, where his mouth was, avoiding the pitfalls of a controlling career and others' onerous expectations, and whittling away non-essentials until he could live comfortably by working only a day a week. Much of the rest of his time he spent pursuing his passion, writing, and the world is a less dark place for it, having received a major lesson from the woods at Walden as to effective ways to practice civil disobedience that would eventually inspire none other than Mahatma Gandhi and help free India from the clutches of British colonialism. Questions worth asking yourself. As children, we're instructed to live well and strive to be the best we can be. But we're rarely encouraged in good faith to contemplate for ourselves what living well and being our personal best actually mean for us as individuals. Instead, we accept the party line. I sum that up in my forthcoming novel, Beginner's Luke, Adventure of an Imaginary Lifetime, an ideal fictional companion to this book, as agreeing to tick off the appointed stages one by one through midlife crisis to forced retirement to doddering senility to death without dignity. Given the patent absurdity of the modern experiment, some paramount questions for those of us seeking to have a profound existence are: whom or what am I living for? Am I living merely to live up to others' notions of me? How would I know that I'm living well and striving to become my best version of myself? Is life a series of products purchased or processes processed? What's the ultimate point of this existence if not to acquire wealth and position? Is that erratic, critical, overbearing voice in my head truly my own, or someone or something else's? Consider writing down your honest answers to these questions in your journal. Then be sure to review your responses after finishing this book and actively beginning to cultivate more personal power. Simplicity as an antidote to mental illness. Looking back on your way of thinking prior to starting this challenging but rewarding journey of increasing your personal power and integrating more and more parts of your total self, you may be surprised at the changes in your perspective. You may even come to see your previous responses to the above questions as showing signs of cognitive dissonance or even emotional instability. Mental illness is an underreported epidemic today, as social media addiction and less than optimal mental states quietly go hand in hand. The bad news is that the obsession with social media is almost certainly producing unhealthy side effects, wrote Zaman Zahariades in Digital Detox. Scientists have discovered that constant exposure to websites like Facebook and Twitter can alter the brain, affecting the ability to process emotions. It can also lead to restlessness, negative self-image, a decline in happiness, and in extreme cases, depression. Clearly, despite the oft-repeated propaganda soundbite that technology is here to make life easier, the increasing complexity of the modern world isn't doing many people a lot of favors. Can you envision yourself as someone living simply, modestly, outside the spotlight of your own ego? Can you imagine creating enough time and space in your daily existence to take the deep dive of the hero's journey beyond your everyday consciousness into the subconscious and unconscious waters of your own corner of the dark sea of awareness? If so, how does what you see in your mind's eye make you feel? I am convinced, wrote Thoreau, both by faith and experience, that to maintain one's self on this earth is not a hardship but a pastime, if we will live simply and wisely. Instead, so many of us run the rat race, spin on the hamster wheel, jog on the treadmill, stumble lost through the bewildering funhouse of this clown show of a world. Compared to a life lived with deliberate simplicity, how successful does that sound? Just because your chains are only in your mind doesn't make them less binding. Free your mind is more than a proverbial movie line. It's urgent advice to those shackled to complexity here in the Matrix. If we opt, over and over, to surrender our valuable energy and time to people and things that hold no real value, and worse, separate us from the people and things that do, the joke's on us, and we have only ourselves to blame. Time exists until it doesn't. Here today, gone tomorrow. What will you say when the grim reaper suddenly appears and asks, "What do you have to show for your life?" In a world of many time-consuming pursuits, most utterly inane, and many major drags on our creative potential, if your answer is not much, it's at least worth considering that you've spent your time wisely. Chapter 3: How to Get Your Groove Back and Enjoy Life Again. What goes around may come around, but it never ends up exactly the same place. You ever notice? Like a record on a turntable, all it takes is one groove's difference, and the universe can be on into a whole nother song. Thomas Pynchon. The Matrix Control System. In many shamanic societies, to quote Gabrielle Roth, if you came to a medicine person complaining of being disheartened, dispirited, or depressed, they would ask one of four questions. When did you stop dancing? When did you stop singing? When did you stop being enchanted by stories? When did you find comfort in the sweet territory of silence? Most assuredly, it goes almost without saying, a medicine person would never, ever ask a suffering individual these four questions. How's your 401k doing? Did you pay all your taxes this year? Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? Did you get the jab for that? Many, yours truly included, feel that not just a smattering of individuals, but practically the whole population shows signs of being disheartened, dispirited, or depressed. At the risk of beating a dead drum, it's safe to say that most people, to once again use Thoreau's parlance, lead lives of quiet desperation. This sorry state of affairs is, in my humble opinion, absolutely on purpose. Referencing the vast inorganic intelligence engaged in energy harvesting those plugged into this highly scripted matrix via, for example, the same divide and conquer strategies run by the corporate and alternative media for decades, John Kreiter explains that relative balance is a conscious farming technique, incorporated in order to keep everything and everyone just slightly off kilter, having us lose ourselves in asinine arguments, activities, careers, etc., designed to disconnect us from our deeper spiritual nature and purpose, promotes the creation of powerful emotions connected to our thoughts and beliefs. In turn, our own externally elicited emotions help shape and direct the controlled chaos of the world. Think back to our brief discussion of mimetic desire in Chapter 1. Expanding on that little introduction, we might sketch the following flowchart to illustrate how this might work on a more technical level in today's supremely networked global culture. Our own thoughts and emotions based on original beliefs, individualized attention, creation of an initial world view, mimetic desire implants, somebody or something else's thoughts and emotions, new beliefs, new thoughts and emotions based in groupthink, collectively controlled attention, creation of a new world order. The result is that the inorganic intelligence calling the shots in this place uses people's own powerfully creative psyches to generate an energy farm, which we rather cavalierly call the world, to sustain itself. Truly, the masses, like thrashing, masochistic puppets controlled from above by emotional strings, are living in a hell of their own largely unconscious making. Yes, we're verging on a situation that reads a bit like science fiction here, but to many shamans, alchemists, and other psychonauts, the admittedly disturbing scenario I'm sketching is really just science fact. Consciousness researcher Tom Montalk addresses the nature of this construct in these explicit terms. What is the matrix? School or prison, depending on your chosen perspective. On the one hand, it is a hyper-dimensional teaching system, accelerating your rate of spiritual evolution by providing you with catalytic experiences in response to your thoughts, emotions, and spiritual composition. On the other hand, he continues, many of these experiences manifest as predatory forces preying upon your weaknesses. Of course, the only way to prevent being manipulated by these forces is to discover, integrate, and transform your weaknesses into strengths. thereby indirectly accomplishing the higher purpose of the matrix, which is to help you transcend it. Like Kreiter, Montauk grasps the true character of our fake matrix. Both writers also understand the ultimate purpose of this crucible of intensity that in the world cult anew I called the game board, to push us to transmute ourselves from the absurd lead of rationality into the profound gold of magicality when alchemically exposed to the refiner's fire. That refiner, in my analogy, is the dragon, the guardian of the entrance to the cave of our shadow that I mentioned earlier while sharing some preparatory thoughts on the hero's journey. The dragon doesn't sleep. It doesn't need to because humanity provides it with a limitless source of energy. The creature's lidless eye, like Sauron's, is forever fixed on us, controlling, indeed, mimetically programming us with our every thought, emotion, and belief. That is, until we awaken ourselves from its spell by going inward on our way out of here. I'll have much more to say about the dragon a bit later, including what it really is, why it's here, and exactly how it does what it does. But for present purposes, Montauk does an excellent job of setting the stage. Addressing what I'm calling the dragon as a plurality, which as a Borg-like collective mind it certainly is, he writes that these predatory forces have their own agenda, which is to expand their power base and sustain themselves by feeding upon humanity's emotional energies, as well as keeping anyone from becoming aware enough to add destabilizing influences to the spiritual prison/farm they are running here on Earth. If Montauk's eloquent sermonette weren't enough already, here's the kicker. The sum total of their hyperdimensional manipulation system may be termed the matrix control system. It is a school of hard knocks that weakens the spiritually weak and strengthens the spiritually strong, in accordance with their choice to be victims or warriors. Sing and dance. In contemplating the sobering ramifications of the foregoing section, I'm reminded of an inspired line by Samuel Beckett, playwright of Waiting for Godot, who once quipped, "When you are up to your neck in shit, all you can do is sing." Accordingly, this chapter is about the necessity, for spiritual warriors, if not worldly victims, of singing our own song and dancing our own dance, despite all the matrix control mechanisms implemented by the dragon and its minions designed to have us sing and dance a bunch of life-wasting bullshit. Could it really be the case that so many of our problems proliferate because this mesmerizing construct and its somnambulistic denizens have forgotten how to dance, how to sing, how to engage storytelling, how to enter into silence? We should consider every day lost on which we have not danced at least once, wrote the great German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Martha Graham, the splendid choreographer who remade modern dance in her own image, saw through the surface into the deeper meaning of movement. Dance is the hidden language of the soul. There is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action, she also said. And because there is only one of you in all time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium and will be lost. Has the world, and not just its people, lost its soul through immobility, laziness, and living a zombified half-life doom-scrolling through virtual reality? Is our own intelligence becoming more and more artificial as we literally ossify in front of our screens? If you're having trouble answering such questions, maybe you should ask Siri. For most of the population these days, the only thing that ever dances is a pair of thumbs texting. No wonder people are aging so fast on the ship of fools, sailing Titanic like through today into no tomorrow. As people's souls shrink through lack of movement, their connective tissue hardens and their bones turn brittle. This isn't metaphoric. This is the mind body spirit connection on full display for anyone who cares to contemplate its cause and effects in real time. Martha Graham again. All that is important is this one moment in movement. Make the moment important, vital, and worth living. Do not let it slip away unnoticed and unused. This is living in the present, as opposed to dying in it, as our culture that simultaneously fears and denies death would have us all do in a myriad of sneaky ways. Overcoming fear and learning to live again. It's a cliche that public speaking is the greatest private fear. But what if this is dead wrong? What if public dancing, and by extension, being willing to dance courageously through life, is our greatest secret fear? You look ridiculous if you dance, said Gertrude Stein. You look ridiculous if you don't dance, so you might as well dance. Not that I'd ever care to see Gertrude Stein dancing, but she raises an important, if usually downplayed point. In an era where so many are intent on retreating into their heads, dance remains a vital link, one worth revitalizing even if it means looking stupid, connecting us to the heart of our physicality. In an extraordinary phenomenon of a book, The Courage to be Disliked, Japanese authors Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga have gone against the grain of today's groupthink narcissism by giving millions of readers permission to ignore the dragon's minions' control weapons of judging, guilting, and shaming. Your life is not something that someone gives you, they write in this provocative, modern-day Socratic dialogue, but something you choose yourself, and you are the one who decides how you live. Always bear in mind that the only person whose judgment matters is yourself. If you can learn to transform self-judgment into good judgment, aka wise circumspection, you've clearly shaken off some of the dragon's spell and already have one foot halfway out the door of this construct. As for dancing itself, to cite Paulo Coelho, author of the international sensation about self-discovery through following one's dreams, The Alchemist, it transforms everything, demands everything, and judges no one. The philosopher's soul dwells in his head. The poet's soul is in his heart, wrote Khalil Gibran, adding that the singer's soul lingers about his throat, but the soul of the dancer abides in all her body. To be or not to be? Is that really the question? Or should it be to dance or not to dance? Dancing is being in this quantum disco we call reality. So what does that make not dancing? Renowned spiritual author Hermann Hesse beautifully remarked this about the transcendent immanence of dancing. The sacred sense of beyond, of timelessness, of a world which had an eternal value and the substance of which was divine, had been given back to me today by this friend of mine who taught me dancing. Step out of your comfort zone. So how do we get our groove back when we've so obviously lost it, often individually and always collectively? The groove is so mysterious, wrote Linda Berry. We're born with it and we lose it, and the world seems to split apart before our eyes into stupid and cool. When we get it back, the world unifies around us, and both stupid and cool fall away. It seems simple enough to say, but perhaps a little harder to do. Harder, but well worth it in the end. Be willing to put in some sweat equity into a future worth living by moving your ass around. Your mind and heart will surely follow. The next thing you know, you'll be on your own hero's journey, zipping past the dragon into the cave of your shadow, and at some point, out into the infinitude of the dark sea of awareness. Or to put it another way, If you want your physical, mental, emotional, and eventually spiritual circumstances to transform completely, perhaps even beyond your wildest dreams, be willing to step out of your comfort zone onto the dance floor of your own mindfully chosen life. Chapter 4. Speak powerfully with silence. Never miss a good chance to shut up. Will Rogers. Conflict resolution. We often view communication as the cornerstone of human connection. Words bridge people, express emotions, resolve disputes. And now, with the rise of AI and its ballooning large language models, we're seeing word based connectivity extend into the furthest reaches of the matrix. Even so, there exists, and will always exist, a realm where words lose their effectiveness, where silence is sovereign. This expansive realm extends into the deep water quietude of the dark sea of awareness. But closer to home, it includes the eminently pragmatic domain of personal boundaries and conflict resolution. Reason tells us that we should always be able to work things out with words. But the absurdly profound truth is that in many crucial moments of conflict, when sanity and safety hang in the balance, choosing not to engage verbally can be by far the most powerful form of speech. Consider that the dragon, the hive mind overlord forever whispering self destructive notions in your ear to extract more of your energy for food, usually wants you to keep talking. The very last thing it needs is for you to shut up when your dander is up and you're on the verge of opening your mouth and inserting your foot. Shamans and energetic alchemists maintain that inner silence can be a sign of the dragon losing its grip on your mind. Outer silence, especially when called for in challenging circumstances, can be a sign that you're starting to experience inner quietude. As you discard things that deplete your energy and begin engaging in activities and processes that increase your personal power, pay attention to any and all such moments when your mind is quiet, yet you're completely functional. These indicate that what you're doing is working, so by all means, stick with it. Silence is certainly the oldest and arguably the purest form of speech. Silence, in the matchless phrasing of the great Persian poet Rumi, is the language of God. All else is poor translation. Silence can be unsettling and disarming, though. We're conditioned to fill the void lest we panic at the thought of our own emptiness. We're encouraged to express our every thought and feeling in absurdly manic ways, yet there's a profound strength in calm, cool, and collected verbal restraint. When we resist the urge to respond impulsively and plant ourselves in our center as opposed to grasping at straws outside ourselves, we tap into a wellspring of inner fortitude. Such mindful silence allows us to detach from the heat of the moment and respond with clarity rather than reactivity. Choosing silence more and more, we lose less and less energy to dumb shit, as I like to say, while intelligently reclaiming our power faster and faster. On numerous occasions, I practiced shamanic and alchemical techniques that allowed me to become lucid in difficult and even traumatic situations where my vital force was spewing out of me and I was able to reverse the flow in real time back into my body. By paying close attention, you can sense energy loss when it's happening, even if you're still working on the ability to see it. Think back to one of the more heated arguments in your life and remember how you felt completely drained after calming down. The phrase emotionally wrecked comes to mind when I recall some of the unhinged arguments I had as a younger man. Well, in the middle of a conflict, it's possible to find silence and begin breathing or otherwise pulling back in power that has been drained from you. When you do this, often the argument simply stops in its tracks or immediately starts to run out of steam. This occurs because the energy that was partially responsible for fueling the conflict, yours, is taken out of the equation. Sometimes the other party or parties involved also seem to benefit. Last but not least, consider that you're simultaneously depriving the dragon of some of its nutrient supply. How to consciously feed on the dragon's energy and not the other way around is a topic for later discussion that gives a new and improved meaning to dragon food. If this topic piques your interest, be sure to make your way to chapters 15 and 16 for an introduction to recapitulation and energy absorption, respectively. You'll also get a lot out of chapter 17, where I explore the fragmentary body and a simple technique you can use to seal this largest of holes in your bioenergy field, where much of your energy loss occurs. Outside the box techniques aside, we can simply, as a matter of principle and power preservation, refuse to participate in unproductive arguments or engage in conversations that diminish our sense of self-worth. Grasp that silence in this context isn't about passive aggression or suppressing our voice. It's about recognizing when our energy is better spent elsewhere or not spent at all. Personal boundaries. In its purest form, silence isn't empty space, a void to avoid. Rather, it's a canvas pregnant with possibilities upon which we can paint our intentions and dreams. Think of silence as a statement of self-respect, a declaration of our boundaries, and a powerful tool for navigating the complexities of human interaction. Simply put, personal boundaries are essential for our emotional well-being and overall mental health. Boundaries define where we end and they begin, protecting our identity and preventing us from being overwhelmed by the imperatives of others. Properly utilized, silence can be an extraordinarily effective method for establishing and maintaining such boundaries. Imagine being bombarded with random requests or pressured into situations that make you uncomfortable. A direct confrontation might escalate the scenario beyond hope of recall, whereas agreeing out of obligation leaves you smoldering with resentment and perhaps even shame. Silence, however, offers a third option, a way to disengage without drama, regret, or guilt. By categorically refusing to engage in conversations that violate our boundaries, we send a clear message, louder than words, that we're not okay with a particular situation or dynamic. This strategy, let it be noted, can be utilized both offline and on. Our silence might be met with resistance initially, but consistent, non-aggressive clamming up speaks volumes efficiently and effectively. Thus, we demonstrate self-respect and a willingness to walk away from situations that compromise our inner peace. Silence can also be a form of pragmatic self-preservation. In the face of anger or aggression, our survival instinct usually urges us to fight back. This type of last resort reaction, however, typically only exacerbates conflict and ends up creating more harm than good. Instead, choosing not to engage and, if necessary, leave the scene allows us to stay centered, preventing things from escalating. Former French President Charles de Gaulle said it best: silence is the ultimate weapon of power. Used skillfully, silence becomes a shield against negativity and manipulation. Silence can allow us to navigate potentially compromising interactions with aplomb and maintain our equilibrium in the face of external pressures. Conflicts are, of course, an inevitable part of life. When dissension arises and testosterone runs high, our instinctual response is to defend our point of view by proving the other party wrong. But as with fighting back unnecessarily, this stubborn approach rarely leads to resolution and often fans the flames of conflict. Get your woo out of your way. True personal mastery is expressed in self control and not reacting. Imagine being caught in a heated argument. Accusations are flying like arrows, battle cries are raised, and bloodlust is soaring. In the heat of the moment, the temptation to fire back with equal force is visceral, palpable. But what if suddenly and unexpectedly you chose to do absolutely nothing? What if you simply listened, observed, and, as if watching a movie that didn't particularly interest you, refused to engage in the drama? Non reaction isn't about ignoring the problem or suppressing your emotions, but about choosing a more skillful and, dare I say, more eloquent response. It's about recognizing that your silence can be more disarming than any logical or illogical argument. By refusing to engage in a back and forth that's generating a lot more heat than light, you create space for the other person to calm down and for the situation to de escalate. This approach requires a high degree of emotional intelligence and maturity. It demands that we step outside the reactive mind imposed by the dragon and observe the situation with detachment. It requires, above all else, that we slow down. This isn't always easy, but the rewards can be immense. In the words of Sharon Salzberg, restore your attention or bring it to a new level by dramatically slowing down whatever you're doing. By mastering the slow art of non reaction, we transform conflict into an opportunity for maturation. We learn to regulate our emotions, communicate far more effectively, and build stronger, more harmonious relationships. The venerated Eastern philosophy of Taoism offers an absurdly profound concept that resonates deeply with the power of silence: Wu Wei, variously translated as effortless effort, effortless action, inaction, and non doing. Wu Wei is about aligning ourselves with the natural flow of life, letting go of control, and allowing things to unfold organically. To the extent that we're usually our own worst enemy, Wu Wei is definitely about getting out of our own way. In the context of conflict resolution, Wu Wei encourages us to approach disagreements with a sense of controlled, but not controlling, detachment. Instead of imposing our will or trying to micromanage the outcome, we learn to flow with the present moment and allow the situation to resolve itself naturally. This doesn't mean being passive or indifferent. The practice of Wu Wei, which can be greatly facilitated through the study of Tai Chi, Qigong, and even Toltec shamanism's equivalent, magical passes, is about finding a delicate balance between action and inaction. We speak our truth when necessary, but we also recognize when silence is the more prudent and persuasive course of action. Wu Wei teaches that genuine strength lies not in forcing our way through life like the proverbial bull in the china shop, but in moving with the current, adapting to changing circumstances, and finding peace even when surrounded by swirling eddies of chaos. As such, it's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most effective action is none at all. By embracing the principles of Wu Wei, we tap into a deeper wisdom that guides us toward harmonious solutions. We learn to trust the natural layout of the situation and find peace in the now, regardless of the challenges we face. If you want to have a bit of lighthearted fun with this oftentimes new agey concept and avoid taking it too seriously in its own rather playful spirit, imagine your woo simply getting out of your way. Then, taking deep breaths as your usually domineering thoughts suddenly stop racing past inside your surrogate mind, embrace your silence and observe quietly as your circumstances change for the better. Chapter 5: The Hidden Battle for Your Godlike Attention. There is nothing as powerful, as capable of transforming itself and the planet as the human imagination. The tools are there, the path is known. You simply have to turn your back on a culture that has gone sterile and dead and get with the program of a living world and a re empowerment of the imagination. Terence McKenna. Attention as a prized commodity. Our attention, the focalization of our own imaginative capacity, is a precious natural resource. From the standpoint of energy cultivation and manipulation, which encompasses both inner alchemy and many types of shamanism, attention is the most valuable commodity there is. Consider the telling expression, pay attention. Attention, as I see it, is the original currency. If you look closely enough at this divine sense with your sixth sense, you can actually see its powerful current flowing. And let it be noted that you almost always end up seeing whatever you're currently paying for. Attention is what harnesses the primal creative power of our thoughts, emotions, and beliefs, which, to oversimplify, combine to form our imagination, in such a way as to build tulpas and egregores, to make dreams come true, and even to create brave new worlds and realities. In his fascinating expose of real alchemy, John Kreider defines attention as the conscious and deliberate focus of awareness. It is the ability to deliberately direct the consciousness in one particular direction. Doing so naturally pulls energy into the thing that the attention is focused on and allows that aligned self to begin to resonate more and more with the object of attention. The upshot of Kreider's position is like a pithy mainline of absolute truth. Attention is the stuff that makes worlds. Unfortunately, it must be pointed out, our stolen attention is also the ultimate tool of the dragon. The predatory designer of this construct co-opts our godlike creative ability by having people tithe, pay their attention outward and upward to the enormous reptile perched atop the capstone of the world cult. Through mental manipulation via mimetic implants on a mass scale that allows it to amass the energy of our attention for its own selfish purposes, the dragon not only plays the role of the architect in the Matrix franchise. Simultaneously, it also intentionally weakens its human herd, its world builders, to such an extent that humanity has allowed itself to be corralled like farm animals on this prison planet. The fight for freedom, relatively and ultimately speaking, begins and ends with our attention, where we place it, and how we use it. I'll have a lot more to say on this topic in the next chapter. But for now, understand that attention is what refines the raw resource of our concepts and feelings into rocket fuel. And as with any fuel, wars are fought over it. Where we direct our attentive focus shapes and informs, literally and materially, our experienced reality. Prolonged attention creates greater intensity. Like a magnifying glass intensifying the sun's rays, our attention amplifies whatever it focuses on. If we're to be responsible creators of our experience, as opposed to haphazard victims of it, it's incumbent on us to attentively choose our path through the matrix with utmost attention to detail. Techno-transhumanism and Prometheus's fire. In today's mesmerizing digital landscape, our attention is madly sought after. Algorithms are ingeniously designed to keep us hooked like addicts by feeding us main lines tailored to hold us captive, in mind and perhaps eventually even in body. If you're sensitive to the flow of energy and semantics, you can unambiguously feel the dragon at work in all things internet, blockchain, and AI. Quite literally, Like a control freak of Leviathan proportions, the dragon is casting a net over humanity to keep our minds chained to the block as our intelligence becomes more and more artificial or not our own. Even though I sometimes jokingly refer to myself as a Luddite in reference to the English workers who tried to sabotage the Industrial Revolution and have made the conscious choice not to own a cell phone lo these many years, I wish to be clear that I'm not advocating a return to so-called primitivism or a knee-jerk abandonment of technology. According to numerous schools of shamanic thought, each era has its own energy signature, the tonal of the times, that we must align with to be fully in it and effective in whatever role or roles we choose to play. But this doesn't mean we have to be totally of our era. We can and ought to, for our own benefit at least, think above, outside, and beyond it. Based on its clear energetic signature as new technologies are breathlessly rolled out following a blatantly pre-written script, the current era might best be described as that of techno-transhumanism. To think that we can or should all go Amish and stick our heads in the sand with regard to technology is wishful thinking, but so too is the black-pilled fantasy that we can't and shouldn't use technology in our own projects and creations. In the end, technology is just a contemporary iteration of Prometheus's fire. It can burn, yes, and its smoke can blind our eyes. But it can also revolutionize our creativity and aid those of us employing it for higher than material purposes to shine a light through the shadows for anyone capable of seeing and following our freedom beacon. To have a knee-jerk reaction to technology is to think like a victim. This is how the dragon wants you to think, in all ways, at all times. Its entire control apparatus is predicated on your tacit or explicit acceptance of victim mentality. I'd argue that this even applies to the world's predatory class, the so-called elites, those puffed-up minions who, while they may get a rush out of preying on others, must on some level suspect they themselves are ultimately just dragon food. But we, not technology, and not even the dragon, are the real creators here. The dragon knows this. That's why it uses us to build its world for it, since apparently it can't do so on its own. And it's high time we figured this out for ourselves. My advice is to feel free to play in the matrix by using technology basically however you see fit to bring your ideas to life for the benefit of yourself and, with any luck, others. The only guideline, if I may suggest one, would be as in the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. The ultimate tool for social engineering. Having embraced the positive possibilities of tech, let's not ignore the downsides. Social media, for example, has quite simply been weaponized for social engineering or mind controlling the masses. As Jim Morrison keenly observed well before the advent of the internet, whoever controls the media controls the mind. Remember those depressing dystopian novels your English teachers had to goad you to read? You know, the ones with Big Brother noting your every action or everyone turned into zombified consumers? It turns out Orwell and Huxley might have been onto something. Today, we're living in a world where our screens are constantly flickering with notifications, feeding us a never-ending stream of information, misinformation, and most perniciously, disinformation. It can't be denied that most people today are voluntarily plugged into the matrix, except instead of being jacked in and hardwired, they keep mindlessly taking hits on the virtual crack pipe of Instagram, TikTok, Meta, etc. The most disturbing part of this web junkie scenario is that the overwhelming majority have absolutely no idea to what extent their thoughts and opinions are being mimetically manipulated day after day by the technology they take for granted. In other words, they're clueless as to how much they resemble an insect unaware of the peril as it tiptoes through the tulips around a spider's web. Obviously, mixing biology metaphors here, I'm talking about the sheeple who fancy they're in control of their information, don't realize they're just pawns in a giant game of social engineering, and would dismiss you as a conspiracy theorist without a single independent thought if you suggested they were being turned into food for something else's dinner. But even if we ignore the dragon's energy harvesting through cultivation of varying levels of mental illness in its human herd, we can safely say there's a complex web of tech companies, advertisers, and governments all trying, spider like, to trap our attention for a variety of reasons, most of which probably aren't in our best interests. Tech companies want to keep us superglued to our screens at all costs. Advertisers want to sell us stuff we don't need. And governments, well, let's just say that these artificial entities explicitly designed to govern the mente, mind, aren't exactly hiding, except in plain sight, their primary agenda. A major problem is that there's precious little transparency about how tech platforms actually work behind the scenes. If you disagree, please explain in detail the Spotify algorithm, to cite but one example, used to spoon out practically the entire world's music feeds. We're rarely, if ever, told precisely how most of these algos are designed, exactly what data they collect, or how our information might be weaponized against us. For anyone who cares to contemplate the situation, that's a big issue, because it shows that we have no way of knowing how or to what extent we're being puppeteered. Stop raging against the machine. The Matrix can feel like a pretty hopeless place. I get that. Nobody in his or her right mind, a tiny minority, admittedly, wants to be caught in an endless digital labyrinth like a techno lab rat. My position is that, on at least a subliminal level, even many of the most benighted sheeple, the really stubborn ones I think of as the consciously clueless, secretly suspect that they're corralled in a system designed to control them, to keep them in check. But I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to be this way. We have the power to change our circumstances individually and maybe, just maybe, collectively. Forget rage. We don't even have to fight back against the machine. But we do have to perform one all-important mind maneuver. We must reclaim our attention and consciously choose a new way to focus it that is both self-directed and empowering. By intentionally shifting the position of our experienced reality's assemblage point, to use a term popularized by Carlos Castaneda, we have the ability to enter a new reality experience, if not always with the snap of our fingers, then certainly with applied effort. This change depends on internal wu-wei as opposed to a process of external struggle. This book is designed to help you get to this new version of the world. There are other helpful resources as well, and I'll be introducing some of those in due course. So please keep your chin up, even in the face of the great obstacles I've been outlining, as you continue reading and processing. I'm all for awareness, critical thinking, even healthy doses of skepticism. But in the end, I don't feel that the information war is a battle worth fighting because it simply can't be won. The dragon can't be defeated on its own turf, the Matrix, using its own operating system, the installed one we think of as our minds. As powerful as he was, not even Neo could defeat the architect when he finally met his maker. Heck, he couldn't even overpower his shadow, Agent Smith, until he wised up and simply stopped fighting. As always, the only way out is in. Withdrawal from the system is a powerful mode of nonviolent resistance, and one never more effective than when done using conscious reclamation and cultivation of our own energy. However we choose to proceed, The first step is to acknowledge the problem, to see it for what it is. We need to recognize that social media is far more than just a harmless distraction or handy tool. Rather, it has been brilliantly architected as a comprehensive net or web for the mind that can be used to alter our thoughts and behaviors, and from there, redirect the creative focus of our attention, usually without our even realizing it. Hunter S. Thompson, the gonzo journalist extraordinaire, once said, "When the going gets weird, the weird turn pro." Even though it may be a little dated, that's rock solid advice for navigating our present techno transhumanist age, where things are getting weirder by the second. In a world saturated with freakish information and algorithmic wackiness, we need to get a little weird ourselves to survive, and, if we play our cards right, thrive. To do so, we must summon the courage of our inner hero to question everything, to think for ourselves, to look for answers outside the box, to resist the urge to conform to the digital hive mind. So, turn off notifications for a day, log out for a while, go for a walk in the real world, mindfully appreciate the taste of your coffee for a change, unplug, read a book, people watch, have a face to face conversation with an actual human being, and remember that there's much more to life than likes and followers, selfies and influencers. Thank goodness. For the love of all you hold dear, stop doom scrolling. Today's constant online barrage can leave us feeling drained and unfulfilled. As mentioned, social media addiction has been linked to depression. It's high time to reclaim our attention, break free from the chains of digital distraction, and rediscover the immense creative power of our own minds for our own benefit. This reclamation project begins with awareness, self-awareness, inner gnosis in a tsunami of insanity. Recognize that your attention is the most valuable thing you can ever own, and you alone have the ultimate power to choose where to direct it. Not all tugs on our attention are benign. Far from it on today's digitized high seas. It should be obvious, even to those skeptical of most conspiracy theories, that there are individuals and entities from the deep who seek to manipulate our focus for their gain. They exploit our fears, insecurities, and desires, bombarding us with negativity and hopelessness, and rarely, if ever, looking on the bright side. Coincidence? I think not. These tactics prey on our natural negativity bias, our self-preservation instinct, our traumas, our insecurities. The human brain is wired to pay more attention to threats and negative stimuli than most other inputs. This is understandable in a predatory environment. Such an approach might have kept us safe in our evolutionary past. But in today's group-thinking, fear-mongering culture, it can lead us down rabbit holes inside rabbit holes of anxiety and despair. Be wary of information sources that consistently evoke fear, anger, or outrage. Be cautious also of ones that yo-yo followers between such negative states and positive ones, only to repeat this whipsaw cycle again and again. Question the motives behind the messages you consume. I'm sorry to say it, but there's a good chance you'll find hidden agendas almost everywhere that don't support you or humanity. Ask yourself whether the messages directed your way are designed to empower you or keep you trapped in a vicious cycle of always seeing the glass as half full. Prolonged exposure to negativity takes a toll on mental and emotional well-being. Doom scrolling, the act of endlessly scrolling through negative news and social media feeds, can leave one feeling helpless, anxious, depressed, and even suicidal. Moreover, this negativity bias can create a self-fulfilling prophecy by tipping the first domino in a chain of interrelated events in a sort of tragic butterfly effect. Simply put, when we focus on the negative, we're far more likely to notice and experience more negativity in our lives. This can give way to a downward spiral where our thoughts and emotions become increasingly self defeating. And almost inevitably, this manifests as more disturbing life events. While I'm all for being emotionally honest with yourself and not running away from your shadow aspects, this quote by Peace Pilgrim certainly offers food for contemplation. If you realized how powerful your thoughts are, you would never think a negative thought. I encourage you to be brave enough to break free from the clutches of doom scrolling. Limit your exposure to negative news and social media. Take a break from the online noise. Try a truther detox, as I propose in Chapter 7. Instead of letting your attention be misdirected, seek out uplifting and inspiring content that nourishes your mind and spirit. Just as a negative focus can drag us down, a positive one has the power to lift us up. When we choose to emphasize gratitude, love, joy, and various other types of empowering wavelengths, we create an upward spiral of positive emotions and experiences. Research has shown that simply giving thanks for life's mundane blessings, for example, can lead to increased happiness, improved relationships, and better physical health. Choosing to pay particular attention to positive emotions such as love and compassion can even boost our immune systems and make us more resilient to most types of stress. Being upbeat can self induce a range of epigenetic changes, switching off bad genes and turning on good ones. Cultivate a practice of gratitude. Take time each day to appreciate your blessings, no matter how insignificant they might seem. Surround yourself with positive people and engage in activities that bring you joy. Put down your smartphone, smell the roses, and, as Gandalf instructs King Theoden when the latter emerges from Wormtongue's hypnotic spell in Peter Jackson's adaptation of Tolkien, breathe the free air again, my friend. Our beliefs and thoughts coalesce into a kind of virtual omnipotence that's literally divine in its creational ability, allowing it to bring different versions of reality into existence. Think of focusing your attention as a way of consciously choosing your own best timeline. One more time for the cheap seats. This point is so important it bears repeating. When we focus on positive thoughts, we attract positive experiences into our field of awareness. Conversely, when we dwell on negativity, we invite more negativity into our experience. This isn't to say we should ignore challenges or pretend everything's hunky-dory when it obviously isn't. Don't be an ostrich and bury your head in the sand when shit's hitting the fan. Rather, the idea is to choose to approach life, even its trying moments, with an upbeat and proactive mindset, believing in our ability to overcome obstacles and create a better future, at least for ourselves. Every thought we think is like a brush stroke on the canvas of our lives. Let's choose our thoughts, then, as a great artist painting a masterpiece of joy, love, success, and fulfillment. We're at a crossroads in human history. The digital age has unearthed unprecedented access to information and connection, but it has also unleashed a torrent of negativity and manipulation. The responsibility lies with each of us to become conscious stewards of our own minds. Our challenge, and a challenging one it is to cultivate discernment in the information we consume minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day. If our desire is to enjoy and perhaps eventually transcend the matrix, we must select with great circumspection the thoughts we wish to energize and direct our focus only toward that which invigorates and empowers us. Anything else simply isn't worth your attention. Chapter 6: The Trouble with Truthing. The belief system was put inside you like a program by the outside dream. The Toltecs call this program the parasite. The human mind is sick because it has a parasite that steals its vital energy and robs it of joy. The parasite is all those beliefs that make you suffer. Miguel Ruiz. Is your louche on the loose? In The World, Cult, and You, I explored an extremely controversial, hot button topic that triggered a lot of readers: the radical idea that truthers and truthing might be dangerous, and that trauma bonding relative to doomsday scenarios might be a symptom of collective mental illness and cultish adherence to groupthink. After publication of my book, which contains a number of playfully challenging memes addressing different aspects of this decidedly unhealthy scenario, I created another that read, "Stop helping doomsday cults bring about doomsday using your energy." One way to grasp what's going on in this bizarrely self-defeating situation is to examine the Matrix and its overlord, the dragon, through the lens of the human energy sometimes referred to as louche. Louche is, in a word, dragon food. We might think of louche as the form of human energy consciousness adopts as it slides toward being unconscious through traumatization and other negative forms of behavioral engineering. As I've been arguing, the conscious energy of attention can be used to do literally anything because it's a focalization of the imagination, the binding life force that amalgamates thoughts, emotions, and beliefs into a powerfully creative gestalt. You could also call this force chi, prana, kundalini, torsion energy, scalar waves, even mojo. These are all merely variations on the central theme of all matrix energy dynamics: people power. Imagination can be concentrated by attention to build positive outcomes, harmonious structures, communities, technologies, even worlds. But it can just as easily be harnessed to create hell on earth. Where power is concerned, there's no judgment, no duality, no left and right, no yin and yang, no good versus evil. Universally speaking, all that matters is power, pure and simple. This is why, in world mythology, the seemingly antithetical archetypes of creation and destruction are often wedded in the same god or goddess. Currently, we find ourselves losing ourselves in a weird feedback loop in this simulated dreamscape of a worldwide civilization managed by the dragon that keeps rerouting human energy to create less than desirable outcomes for everybody except the dragon. In this debilitating scenario, doomsday cults of all kinds are allowed to thrive online and off because they serve our spiritual adversaries' trauma-based mind control agenda. It doesn't matter whether we're talking bona fide doomsday cults identifying as such, or camouflaged truther cults masquerading as YouTube channels. All such gaslighting organizations are used by the dragon to bend the spoon of reality in a doomsday direction here in this louche siphoning matrix. When you give doomsday or other fear-mongering cults your attention, just your attention, simply by listening to their words, and certainly by subscribing to them, sending them likes, shares, follows, and even money, you're offering up your precious power in promotion of doomsday. Don't shoot me, I'm just the messenger. Again, attention is the faculty of focusing the life force. When you allow your attention to be negatively focused by another mind, whether that of the dragon or even another person, that mind can create with your personal power, which has now become louche, what it will. Realize that nothing any of these so-called truthers are saying is inherently true because there's no there to begin with in this construct. It's all made up, every bit of it, including anything calling itself science, that scam of scams in this benighted house of mirrors ruled by the false god of rationality. It's widely acknowledged by many pundits that we no longer live in an age of news, but of narrative as news. But what if this is old news? What if things have always been this way? Indeed, I suggest they have. When you invest your attention in a particular line of truthing, you're choosing to buy into, energetically support, or pay for with your attention somebody or something else's narrative. Simple as that. We can easily extrapolate this dynamic even to works of literature, movies, shows, music, and other forms of mind manipulation on whose altars you offer up the sacred gift of your attention. When you think about it this way, human sacrifice is more prevalent today than ever. Placebo and pronoia power. Our individual attention is exceedingly powerful, no doubt about it. But when our attentions, plural, come together in an aligned group, we're looking at the nuclear option, creative or destructive potential on a monumental scale. In signing a tacit contract by attending to things that don't contain inspiration or optimism, get your mind around the rule of engagement that your energy can and will be used against you by the dragon and its minions. I know that certain aspects of my work having to do with the world cult might be considered heavy. Still, given my ultimately empowering message of holing and transcendence, I suggest that my writing on this subject constitutes a sort of psychological litmus test separating spiritual warriors from mundane victims. Warriors can't get enough of my perspective, and they've told me so repeatedly. Victims would rather visit a proctologist than consider the actual nature of the world they inhabit and their role in producing and sustaining it. Could this be because there are fewer and fewer genuine individuals, again, in the sense of being individuated, in this period of orchestrated chaos in which tribalism is making a fierce comeback left, right, and center? Or perhaps informed, measured optimism such as mine is dismissed because it appears to contradict the so-called facts, even though facts, like weather patterns, can and do suddenly change as the scientific narratives that establish facts mysteriously mutate. On this subject, consider the fact that the speed of light, that universal constant on which the massive edifice of modern physics is largely based, is forever changing. Several years ago, Rupert Sheldrake made this point emphatically in a highly popular TED Talk. And do you know what happened to that talk? It was rigorously attacked and censored by the dragon's gatekeepers of acceptable discourse. Or maybe the comparatively sane voices of hope, as opposed to hopium, are ignored because trauma-based mind control produces addiction to despair in the masses, a kind of Stockholm syndrome throughout the matrix. Whatever the case, the very neologism hopium is, in my opinion, just another clever psyop employed by the dragon's yes men and women to detract and distract from the empowering notion that positivity by itself can change the world. Our feelings, thoughts, beliefs, and even expectations act as filters through which our imaginations initiate the process of generating our particular experienced reality. These filters influence our interpretation of events, our interactions with others, and even our physical health. Take, for instance, the well-documented placebo effect. This phenomenon is a ringing testament to the influence of an upbeat focus. When we believe in a positive outcome, our bodies respond accordingly, prompting production of endorphins, pumping up the immune system, and even dulling our perception of pain. Conversely, the nocebo effect demonstrates the detrimental impact of a negative focus. If we go in expecting side effects from a treatment, for example, we're a lot more likely to experience them, even if the treatment itself is just a sugar pill. This highlights the wisdom of cultivating positive expectations and minimizing negative self talk. These effects, it should be noted, aren't limited to medical contexts. They permeate every aspect of our lives. The key takeaway here is that our minds are extraordinary tools for creating desired or feared outcomes. A related discussion revolves around paranoia and its opposite, pronoia. Paranoia isn't the only way to manifest consequences, in this case, negative ones, through the focus of attention. Individuals prone to paranoia may interpret impersonal interactions as personally directed attacks, creating a self-fulfilling dynamic of fear and mistrust. Alternatively, we can consciously opt for pronoia, the belief that the universe, multiverse, or whatever you wish to call it, is conspiring to bless you at all times, appearances notwithstanding. By operating with pronoia, we invite a number of potential benefits that have the power to radically change our lives for the better, leading to greater happiness, resilience, and fulfillment. With pronoia, we're far more likely to perceive breakdowns as breakthroughs, attract positive relationships under even the most challenging conditions, and experience a sense of flow and synchronicity while others around us might be stuck in a rut. Just as the placebo and nocebo effects demonstrate the power of positive and negative expectations, respectively, the concepts of pronoia and paranoia offer further insight into the role our perceptions play in crafting our reality. It's a maxim that where attention goes, energy flows. Or as the famous line from Field of Dreams phrases it, if you build it, he will come. Focus on a fairy tale city on a hill, and someday you just might live there. Focus on a dystopia like the one in Hunger Games, and your mind as a foreign installation. Sadly, in this upside down construct, when you broadcast fear and panic at the top of your lungs, the dragon's algorithms can't get enough of you. The upshot is that you receive a wildly disproportionate amount of attention, especially considering that your message is, despite any and all positive window dressing, anti-human garbage. Hope panhandles while fear sells like hotcakes. This may lean toward the cliche, but it's just the way things are here in this nowhere, right now, anyway. A fearful outlook eventually leads to behaviors that are, in the final analysis, self-sabotaging. This is because such behaviors are the intentional results of the dragon's net or web of mental strategies designed to entrap you and harvest your loosh. The irony, of course, is that we ultimately entrap ourselves and sacrifice our own loosh. It's as if there's a universal law even the dragon can't ignore, requiring it to have us agree on some level to our own undoing. Enter the ubiquity of contracts and the pervasive idea of social contracts in this construct. My research into and practice of shamanism and inner alchemy has led me to conclude, logically as well as experientially, that the majority of the population are downloaded with the consciousness of the dragon. This means that most people are using a foreign, read extraterrestrial, installation as their operating system. In other words, to reiterate this freakishly literal point, the masses aren't really even thinking with their own minds. Now, does their consistently insane behavior make a little more sense? Technically, you could say that we're really not even up against mind control per se. Instead, we're faced with the far more troubling prospect of mind ownership by an absentee owner. No wonder Matrix denizens can't see the forest for the trees, can't see the positive, can't acknowledge the potential for transformation that's all around, but more importantly, inside them. Get out of the feedback loosh. But my goal isn't to focus my own powerful attention on the negative, despite the ponderous darkness that's nearly palpable to anyone with a shred of their own consciousness intact. I propose, in fact, that the incessant fear mongering heaped on us today is ironically a tool implemented at the behest of the dragon to wake the flock up. Yes, hate on me if you must, but I'm going there by suggesting that the dragon, which I've elsewhere called the great parasite, is actually here to teach us about who we are and the world we live in. When you step back from it, you realize that the whole idea of so many fearful conspiracies proliferating like harmful bacteria everywhere isn't just surreal or overkill, it's ludicrous. This reality is so obviously unreal. It's like bad screenplay writing. No matter how many times you see the same tired script being played out on the world stage, if you can manage to think for yourself just a little, it's simply not believable. Could this be by design? Part of the dragon's wake up strategy for humanity? In The World, Cult, and You, I touch on the process of awakening that many seekers like myself have gone through, coming face to face with conspiracies galore after doing the research and all that runaround. I explicitly state that I'm not advising people to forego exploring their interests, thinking rationally, etc. I also emphasize that there comes a time, a sort of epiphany like something out of Through the Looking Glass, when you realize that everything you've discovered through your research has basically been fed to you because you've been looking for it. We're in a complex feedback loop, or for most people, feedback loosh, that reveals to us an imaginary reality that we choose to buy into just before it becomes our lived reality. So many things are put out to make it seem as if we're helpless victims of this crazy matrix. This is the purpose of such lopsided half truths as the popular, and for that reason alone, highly dubious, notion that we're stuck against our will in a soul trap or reincarnation trap that most people will never escape. Obviously, such a worldview isn't compatible with, say, a starting point founded on a Christian eschatological perspective with a definitive end date to the status quo. Yet, if you keep feeding your new research interest on souls transmigrating ad nauseum into the construct, it will keep giving back to you precisely what you're looking for. But then, if you become interested in something else and start researching that, suddenly the construct starts feeding back to you new information to support your new viewpoint. It's like magic, because it is, thanks to your magical attention. See how this works? If you take a moment to compare the first two lines of your research, linear eschatology versus circular metempsychosis, you'll note that they're utterly incompatible, mutually exclusive. Yet you've uncovered mountains of evidence supporting both theories. This is what's happening on a massive, multifaceted scale in today's conspiracy theory community. The problem is that the entire smorgasbord of conspiracy evidence is just fabrications of consciousness. It doesn't prove anything except that attention is really, really creative. The construct is, with a wink and a nod, as it were, clearly just playing your perceptions back to you in endless variations. At some point, the only logical conclusion is that this is all in your mind. That's the wake up moment when you finally slap your forehead and say, I'm creating all this baloney. And then the all important follow up question. So, what do I want to create now that I'm conscious that I'm creating everything? Be a solipsist, not a narcissist. From the perspective of consciousness expansion, it's actually a service to us to have so much weirdness thrown at us, like classic slapstick pies in the face, over and over again. The weirdness might very well be, it's at least worth considering, part of our own design from some higher aspect of ourselves to wake us up here in the dream of this so called reality. When I language my thoughts this way, know that I'm far from inviting you to become a public narcissist like some plastic law of attraction guru, patting yourself on the back in a selfie for having finally recognized your own divine nature. Instead, I'm suggesting that you embrace your closet solipsist. In this context, solipsism is the idea that, to use a well worn phrase, there's only one of us here, a creative consciousness forever experiencing permutations of itself, for whatever reason. This notion is often ridiculed by truthers, many of whom simply loathe it with every fearful fiber of their manipulated being. To them, good news must be fake news. That should tell you something. When you experience the full impact of what I call the solipsistic awakening, you're not staring at your navel, you're staring into infinity. You've got both feet in the dark sea of awareness and are about to take a deep breath and dive right in. Back here in the Matrix, you've also just been handed a heaping helping of personal accountability. We're talking a Peter Parker moment when you realize that with tremendous power comes tremendous responsibility. Is manifestation always getting exactly what your ego wants? I don't think so. Manifestation is, in my opinion, getting exactly what the wiser part of you knows you need, and then the less wise part of yourself has to deal with the after effects. Such a situation is the direct opposite of narcissism. You do come face to face with the staggering magnitude of what you're capable of, yes. But rather than having your ego inflated at the reflection of your bad self, you experience awe in relation to the totality of what you are and feel deep humility. In a solipsistic world where there's only one of us here, narcissism and runaway ego simply dissipate because, well, who is there to impress? Who is there to control? Except yourself. Let's include in yourself your own responses to the very things you're creating and then having to live with, such as the dragon and its crazy making funhouse, the Matrix. With that said, once again, I emphatically encourage you to choose your life and world wisely. Chapter 7. Try a truther detox. Detox your mind, body, and your contact list. Supernova Slom. The reality misconception. In a general sense, as I'm using the term, truther refers to anyone regularly placing agency, i.e., power, outside individual and collective conscious attention. In other words, whether they're aware of their error or otherwise, truthers falsely insist on affirming a pre existing arbitrary reality outside the purview of our own creatively applied awareness. My position, one I share with countless mystics, yogis, shamans, alchemists, and other way outside the boxers, is that there's no verifiable outside reality, no tangible home base in the real. Instead, there's only a simulacrum, or, more accurately perhaps, a simulation-style dreamscape mimicking an actual physical world inside an infinity, the dark sea of awareness, of similarly attention-generated constructs. The reality misconception can take various forms. The two most common are materialism, in which a real world somehow manages to exist before or without anyone's awareness of it, and religion, in which a divine being or force remains in a world miraculously outside the world. If you believe such fairy tales, fine, but just don't call them truth. Maybe opinions based on secondhand knowledge would be a more accurate description. Or more straightforwardly, just call them mimetic implants. Meanwhile, as Neville Goddard so accurately and beautifully stated, we humans live in a world that is nothing more or less than our consciousness objectified. My view is that nothing can ultimately be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, except to oneself via the wisdom or gnosis of personal experience. And anything and everything can be easily debunked by the cavalier exercise of the fraudulent Dieu du jour, reason. Carlos Castaneda famously described humanity's collective perceptual lens, its so-called assemblage point, as being currently stuck in the extremely limiting place of reason. The situation is profoundly absurd because while reason is smugly convinced of its rightness, in actuality it's merely one of an infinitude of possible interpretations of the many fictitious rules and laws that supposedly govern this forever malleable construct. On the subject of the false god of reason, I love the following penetrating passage from John Criter. Clearly, he was influenced by Castaneda's perspective, only to go well beyond the latter's purview in many important respects. Read it several times if necessary to let its full implications sink in. True logic is not reason, but reason can be said to be a small branch of logic, a type of group-based deductive logical scheme that relies on the mass power of the group in order to impose a perceptive orderliness in human consciousness and therefore the human objective world. One could think of reason as being the enforcement arm that helps to bring a certain slant to individual mass consciousness. The evolution of reason throughout human history is really the refinement of a certain type of limited self-awareness and individuality. This individual consciousness is irreversibly linked to mass human consciousness because the self that we call the individual is in reality a product of a mass mental movement referred to as reason. Not to put too fine a point on it, but the point is that the lens of reason, by focalizing our commandeered attention in a certain way under the skillful direction of the dragon, has created this mess of a world we live in. Isn't that reason enough to distrust reason and begin putting a little more faith in something, anything else, say intuition? Reification, or making shit real. In essence, truthers, by doggedly searching for the holy grail of an external absolute, perpetuate the fatal snafu of separating the creator from the created. But as I proposed, the creator and the created are one creature, the Ouroboros forever consuming and producing itself simultaneously. In maintaining such a faulty reason-based mindset, truthers do a number of disservices to themselves, their message, and their followers here in this subjective construct, in which objectivity is merely a myth of overweening science. As I once quipped, always, always, always put science in quotes. A major disservice in this scenario is that truthing inevitably leads to disempowerment, in which people, lured by the false promise of solutions, are tricked into stepping outside themselves again and again for answers to their personal and collective dilemmas, when, as I repeat, the only way out is in. At their most benign, or least malignant, truthers are genuine seekers doing the best they can and sharing their truth. While they've been led astray by reason and are playing the Pied Piper for others in turn, at least they're not doing this intentionally. Even though their heads may be confused, their hearts are mostly in the right place. At their worst, Truthers know exactly what they're doing, in my opinion anyway, and are happy to serve as parasitic mind controllers on the payroll of our tutelary spiritual adversary, the dragon. In this capacity, truthers are indistinguishable from cult leaders. Both knowingly extract money and loosh, or secondhand vital force, for their own purposes before tithing a significant portion of the stolen attention power up the food chain of the world cult to the god, the dragon, or great parasite, who sits atop it. Truthers are experts, conscious or otherwise, at promoting doomsday and other negative and or limiting outcomes through manufactured consent that works exactly the same way as today's mainstream press that delivers subjectively driven, outcome-generating narratives in lieu of objectively reported news. Reification is a helpful concept to emphasize here. To reify, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, means to make something more real or consider it as real. By using a toolkit of brainwashing tactics for tapping into mimetic desire in order to energize the power of collective belief in whatever, a scientific model, a version of history, a conspiracy theory, etc., truthers aren't discovering truth. They're just making shit real. That, my friends, in a soundbite, is how this world, on personal as well as communal levels, manifests. Like it or not, we're doomed or blessed, depending on your perspective, to inhabit an eternally looping circuit that involves our thoughts, innermost desires, actions, etc., in telling back to us the story we're telling about our lives, individually and collectively. Truthers are on the payroll. That's how they roll. Regardless of their degree of complicity in creating groupthink via public gaslighting, it must be stressed that a major motivation of both kinds of truthers mentioned above was summed up by Upton Sinclair when he said, "It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it." Or as I put it in these lyrics to a song called Doom Scrollin', today's doom prophets are all about profit. They're on the payroll. That's how they roll. I don't need the right wing or the left wing. I'm growing my own wings. Thank you very much. It doesn't matter what truther specialization one has in mind, and there are multitudes to choose from. Secret societies, extraterrestrials, hollow earth, Tartaria, mud floods, plasma apocalypse, rogue planets, or other doomsday clickbaitery full of sound and fury signifying a load of nothing. Regardless of whether they desire to be of service to humanity, truthers, despite any and all metaphysical leanings, by definition succumb to a critical error that makes them part of the problem, not the solution. Adherence to something ostensibly real, a real truth in a manifestly contrived mindscape. In The World Cult and You, I was careful to distinguish between truthers and other types of consciousness explorers. Truthers, I said, are perilous to those with a questioning nature because they give the false comfort illusion, one perfectly attuned to this age of disillusionment with religion and even science, of providing answers to the fake reality's mysteries, even though when you examine their track records, they do no such thing. Note that I'm not talking about most consciousness explorers and reality researchers here. Truthers focus on solutions in the outside world, while the majority of sincere psychonauts understand that there is no outside world, and that empowerment in and escape from this crazy construct can only be an inside job. The best psychonauts, or mappers of consciousness, could care less what appears to be, or not be, happening in the external reality, which, by the way, in a way that undermines the real in everyday terms, appears at least somewhat different for everyone. Instead, devoted psychonauts are concerned with the internally generated dream that gives rise to the illusory dreamscape called reality. Author Ken Eaglefeather succinctly explains why the mastery of conscious dreaming, as opposed to fighting the good fight in the real world, is of utmost importance for anyone seeking to create his or her experience. Reality, or at least the perception of it, is an ever-expanding dream. Psychonauts may reference what is taken for reality, as we all must do if we wish to communicate with one another, but they don't seek answers there, as they grok that the construct is a funhouse of creative mirrors that merely reflect back to us the real that we see in them. Truly, we're the creators of all that we behold. If you fail to grasp this operational principle, it pretty much doesn't matter how smart or talented a researcher you are. Inevitably, you'll just go in circles while forever convincing yourself and your followers that you're hot on the trail of a major breakthrough. Ready for a parasite cleanse? A related analogy for conceptualizing how truthing functions is that research in the matrix might be said to merely create rabbit holes that go ever deeper into the matrix. In a mind-bending Aikido move of its own, the matrix makes it so that the closer truthers and other mundane researchers feel they are to the truth, the further they technically are from it. At the risk of stating the obvious, when one has parasites, even mental ones like the great parasite and its mouthy minions, the only remedy is to do a parasite cleanse. This means that for a full week, if you're willing to give it a try in good faith, you'll go cold turkey off fear porn and useless research while focusing solely on empowering yourself. You may suffer withdrawal symptoms. Most truth junkies do. Delirium tremens isn't uncommon, but that's okay. You'll start to feel much steadier, lighter, and clearer in no time. Besides, what do you really have to lose, except mental parasites? Productive alternatives to doom scrolling. During and also after your week-long vacation for the heart and mind, the following 11 activities, listed in no particular order of importance, are healthy alternatives to wasting your precious time and energy materializing someone else's vision of worldwide chaos and destruction. See what works for you, give it a go, and watch your life change rapidly for the better. 1. Make a video or write a blog post of your own vision of a positive future to energize a different outcome. 2. Honor someone you love with a poem, a portrait, or another creative tribute to a meaningful connection in your life. 3. Pick up a new hobby or learn a different sport to change your neurological pathways and open up novel cognitive possibilities beyond today's pervasive fear porn. 4. Move your body with dance, surfing, qigong, or whatever else turns you on to shake off the over-the-top doom and gloom and embrace the limitless potential of the present moment. 5. Focus, really focus all the creative power of your attention on something incredibly positive you'd love to see happen in your life for 5 minutes a day until it happens. 6. Repeat the above with something you'd love to witness in the world at large. Shoot, put in 10 minutes a day if you can spare the time. Lord knows this world needs all the help it can get. 7. Make it a point to change one judgmental reaction a day to its opposite, non-judgmental okayness. 8. Find ways to laugh at genuinely funny things, people, and situations, at your own follies and shortcomings, at the profound absurdity of it all. Let laughter empty you of self-importance and fill you back up with creative helium until you're light enough to float. 9. Choose peaceful silence the next time conflict crops up in your life. 10. Share empowering messages with friends and followers to pay your attention forward into a brighter future for all. 11. Choose one day a week to go off socials completely. Use this time to nurture yourself and come up with additional strategies to unplug from a society self-destructively addicted to doom scrolling. Chapter 8: How to Navigate the Online Noise in the Long Run. I've spent the morning Googling digital detoxes. Nick Spalding. Upping the ante on your doom fast. If you've decided to do a truther detox, as suggested in the previous chapter, you might consider going even further during your week-long doom fast by getting off social media altogether. I realize going completely cold turkey off socials might sound like virtual death to the ears of your ego. So be it. Some of my longer stints offline, which often occurred by accident instead of design, hurricanes, blizzards, etc., ended up being pivotal breakthrough moments in terms of my creativity. This topic is related to my discussion of the importance of procrastination in Chapter 11. Consider that today's world thrives on interconnectedness. We're blitzkrieged with branding, updates, selfies, opinions, and curated lives. It's easy, indeed normal, to feel lost and overwhelmed in all the white noise. Considering this sad state of affairs, this passage from John Mark Comer's The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry rings truer by the day. The reason we live in a culture increasingly without faith is not because science has somehow disproved the unprovable, but because the white noise of secularism has removed the very stillness in which it might endure or be reborn. It strikes me as unreasonable, to say the least, to think that we can return to our stillness if we stay plugged in 24/7 to a matrix purposely designed to move us into busyness, thus the need for regular time away from the madding online crowd. Consider such stints devoted to quieting the mind, or frankly, doing just about anything remotely healthy offline, psycho-spiritual resets. Exercise your superpower by being yourself. Let this penetrate for a moment. Your individuality, your personal energy and perception is a superpower. Don't let the digital din convince you that you're weak. You're much stronger than you realize. As a thought experiment, picture social media as a giant high school cafeteria. Remember the intense pressure to fit in? Online, that pressure is terrifically amplified. Algorithms track and maybe someday will even anticipate your every click. This creates echo chambers inside echo chambers, but true connection thrives on genuineness, authenticity. When after time away, you do return to the social circus of the internet, be sure to embrace what makes you different. Share your passions, your motivators, not a stranger's. You might be surprised at who resonates with your message, even if your message is that you don't need a message to be yourself. You might make new friends. Your life path might begin to travel in unexpectedly fulfilling directions. As you emerge from your truther and social detox, take a deep breath and make a commitment to use technology as consciously as possible. Be absolutely mindful of the content you choose to consume. When attempting to comprehend a person, topic, or situation, seek out diverse perspectives. But in the end, be sure to listen hard for your intuition, your own personal truthometer, the only one that ultimately matters, that all the white noise is desperately trying to drown out. A world full of identical voices is, in a word, boring. As I put it in the following lyrics excerpted from another song, Living Large, that I hope to release one of these days, if you have a lot to say, know it won't fit in a tweet. If a mind needs a big rhythm, try matching it to the algorithm. Outside the box isn't tolerated, where every outcome's generated, and intellectual negligence worships artificial intelligence. No doubt about it, man. It's hit the fan. Online's a brainwashing bitch, so screw your niche. But hey, that's the point. To throw freethinkers out of joint, to contract upward dreams to downward schemes. Instead of giants, we get wannabes, shrunken yes men and NPCs, fact checkers who can't read, and gatekeepers who don't bleed. The net's a petri dish where controllers grow little fish, tribes of cults and cults of tribes. Our greatest minds have sucked their bribes to give up living large and accept something else in charge. But not me, hell no. I'll gladly burn out before I go, speaking my mind for no one to hear. At least living so, there's nothing to fear. We're social creatures, hardwired to seek connection. But where's the line between belonging and losing ourselves? In the best of circumstances, being true to yourself is a delicate dance, a tightrope walk, one with a long way to fall if you screw up, between community and individuality. Imagine joining a book club, completely jazzed to discuss your favorite novel. You quickly realize everyone else loved it too, but for a totally different reason. They all seemed to agree what the book was about, but you couldn't disagree more. Do you conform to the group's interpretation, suppressing your own? Or do you speak your mind, risking potential disagreement and unpleasantness? Do you exercise the superpower of your personality, cape and all, like Superman? Or do you play the role of Clark Kent, hiding who you really are behind your nerdy glasses? Consider what you would have done had you participated in Stanley Milgram's infamous 1960s obedience experiments. He examined test subjects' extreme, to say nothing of extremely dangerous, willingness to kowtow to presumed authority figures, even when ordered to do potentially lethal harm to others. Social pressure plays out constantly and in magnified fashion in the digital world. Our egos are stroked with likes and comments for echoing popular opinions. But true connection requires vulnerability and the courage to share our authentic selves, even when this shows how different we are. It's sort of like cooking. A pinch of salt might enhance the flavor, but too much overwhelms the dish. Community is that way. It might add spice to life, but too much conformity can make us bland. The key is to identify thriving communities that celebrate individuality, neutral spaces where differences are valued, not silenced. Look for groups that encourage healthy debate, where you can express your perspectives honestly without fear of judgment, where you can wear your superhero on your sleeve. And always be on the lookout for seemingly positive communities that are really just closet cults. As I put it in my last book, in my experience, both in the real world and online, things almost inevitably start out as communities with leaders and end up as communes with dictators. Counteracting social media addiction. Let's face it, social media is engineered to be more addictive than heroin. Every notification, every like releases a tiny dopamine hit, keeping us hooked. These platforms are designed to make sure our thumbs never stop twiddling and our minds never really start thinking. Imagine scrolling through your feed, bombarded with images of perfect physiques and worldly success. It's easy to fall into the comparison trap and end up feeling grossly inadequate. Confronted with such manicured perfection, we easily forget that social media tends to present a super distorted view of reality. It's basically a highlight reel, not the behind the scenes. But we have the power to choose how we respond to this veneer of glitz and glam. We can curate our feeds to include a variety of different voices. Remember, social media, like any of today's tech, can be a tool. We can use it to connect, learn, and share our take on things in wildly creative and uber empowering ways. That said, In a world dominated by screens, it's normal to overlook the simple pleasures of offline interaction. Remember the joy of a face to face chat, not with Chat GPT? The shared laughter over some delicious comfort food? The thrill of experiencing something new without documenting it like a born narcissist for social media? Think about the last time you had a deep conversation with someone. Not just an exchange of pleasantries, but a genuine connection where you shared vulnerabilities and engaged in meaningful dialogue. Chances are it wasn't through a screen. Offline interfaces offer a richness and depth often absent from online interactions. We pick up on subtle cues like body language, tone of voice, and even personal energy, allowing for more substantial understanding and empathy. This isn't about disconnecting entirely or permanently, but about finding a reasonable balance. Consider scheduling regular digital detoxes, even if it's just a few hours at a time. Put down your phone, step away from the screen, and engage with the world around you. Go for a spin through nature. Strike up a conversation with a perfect stranger. Rediscover the lost art of postcard writing. You might be astounded at the connections you forge and the richness these bring to your life. Above all else, stay true to yourself. So, how do we navigate this digital landscape while staying true to ourselves? You don't need to become a hermit like Thoreau, but your engagement does need to be conscious. Use technology to enhance your life, not dictate the terms of your existence. First, embrace solitude and quietude. Carve out time for uncluttered reflection away from the adrenalized stimulation of the digital world. Creating art, doing yoga, or even strolling through a public park can help you calmly reconnect with your superpower, your unique inner voice. Next, be highly selective with your digital diet. Stay mindful of the accounts you follow and the content you consume. Consider unsubscribing more than you subscribe for a while. Play the role of a spectator, an observer, coolly assessing how people present themselves before engaging them. Seek out diverse perspectives and limit exposure to vapid echo chambers that reinforce established tastes and biases. Don't be afraid to disconnect, technologically as well as interpersonally. Set boundaries not just around your internet use, but also on your human interactions. Designate screen and even people free time for solo activities you enjoy, whether reading or pursuing a hobby. Make friends with yourself. Embracing your quirks can help. What makes you different is what makes you interesting. Cultivate your passions even if they're not mainstream. Regardless of whether you choose to share them online, you'll be enriched by simply getting to know and being the fascinating individual you are. In short, don't hesitate to swim against the current of the world. If you decide to broadcast your uniqueness, you might just find that your life is greatly enhanced as you forge alliances with like minded free thinkers. On the other hand, if you opt to keep your superpower on the down low, that path will also have its considerable rewards, some of which you and only you will appreciate. Finally, understand that taking time for and by yourself is a tried and true recipe for building your energy and increasing personal power. For those following the shamanic and or alchemical path out of the matrix into the dark sea of awareness, learning to go solo is an indispensable survival skill. Start with a single step. Navigating the digital age without losing ourselves is an ongoing journey, not a singular destination. To rephrase campaign strategist Jim Carville's famous line responsible for getting Bill Clinton elected back in 1992, it's about the journey, stupid. This journey all seekers today must undertake is to discover a working balance between connection and individuality, a productive confluence between interfacing with the world and nurturing that still small voice, our truthometer, inside. The goal is, eventually, to have that unassuming voice that articulates our intuition and gnosis Replace the dragon's loud and disempowering chatter that plays like an insane tape loop in our minds. That is, until we build up enough power to just say no. Conformity is anathema to this process of rewiring our minds, just as authenticity tremendously promotes it. To quote Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, a world-renowned writer on death and dying, "It is not the end of the physical body that should worry us. Rather, our concern must be to live while we're alive, to release our inner selves from the spiritual death that comes with living behind a facade designed to conform to external definitions of who and what we are. Having the courage to be ourselves, even when this rubs others the wrong way, might seem like a small step in the process of becoming. But as the Chinese proverb goes, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." Finally, embrace your inner rebel, the rad side of your superhero, even if you have no clue what you're doing and aren't altogether clear as to why you're doing it. Don't hold back from challenging the digital noise with your unique perspective, even if you're the only one listening. Resist the urge to conform on principle. Over the long haul, as your mind becomes more and more your own, you'll thank yourself. Chapter 9: Authenticity and Facelessness. Who's the real phony here? Yours truly. Get to know J.D. Salinger, man of mystery. As a relatively established indie writer who has never so much as posted my photo online, I'm in a better position than most to sympathize and even empathize with J.D. Salinger of Catcher in the Rye fame. As mentioned earlier, I've never even owned a smartphone, and neither would have Salinger if such invasive, time-wasting contraptions had held sway in his heyday. What emerged from reports inside the lines of Salinger's legendary reclusiveness was a snapshot of, frankly, just another eccentric artistic genius who probably felt similar to his iconic protagonist Holden Caulfield, who said, "I was surrounded by phonies. They were coming in the goddamn window." Salinger was into certain controversial alternative medicine practices, such as urine therapy, and that was back in the day, preferred health menus to the terribly sad standard American diet, loathed the media with every fiber of his being, leaned toward the kinky with his love interests. You get the picture. The jury's still out on the scope and breadth of his erotic proclivities. And honestly, at this stage of global decadence when the worst perversions are rubbed in our collective faces daily, who really cares? What impresses me most about his biography isn't the talent or even the wild overnight success it engendered, but the fact that as his fame grew to demigod proportions, he cared less and less about it. Maybe other celebrities experience this kind of non-attachment, but rarely do they just drop below the radar of the world like an extraterrestrial submarine and stay there. As time went by, in fact, though he kept writing copiously, he simply stopped publishing. "There is a marvelous peace in not publishing," he told one lucky reporter in a rare interview. "Publishing is a terrible invasion of my privacy. I like to write. I love to write. But I write just for myself and my own pleasure." Elsewhere, Salinger admitted to an overabundance of literary inspiration, even as his publishing days came to an untimely end. "I'm up to my ears in unwritten words." Photos of Salinger are nearly as unfindable as his last manuscripts, though a handful of images have emerged over time. I'm confident he'd hate that. He seemed hell-bent on erasing personal history in an almost shamanic fashion. His journey was an inward one, not an outward one. More than most, he seemed to grok what we've been unpacking in these pages, namely, the revolutionary idea that the only way out is in. Many belonging to today's lost generation could learn from his example. Ignore anyone telling you exactly who you should be. Salinger's inwardness set him squarely against the current of a global culture spinning quickly into extravagant eddies of public narcissism with widespread access to online photography and eventually video approaching downstream. Over the decades of my own intentional inaccessibility, every now and then I've fielded a comment from a reader to this effect: I find it hard to connect with you without being able to see your face. To which I've always wanted to, but never did, reply with something along these lines: I totally understand. I'm sure the earliest readers of printed text in the post Gutenberg era experienced a massive disconnect with only faceless authors to read. Occasionally, similar criticism has been altogether excessive, brutal even. If you're not willing to show your face, you must have something to hide. I wish you were a more authentic person. Which brings me to my topic for this chapter: authenticity and facelessness. Authenticity has become a buzzword, to say nothing of cash cow, in certain spiritually oriented content creation circles, where one often, bizarrely, has the sense of receiving personalized instructions on how to be oneself. In the interest of full disclosure, let me make it clear that I'm very much aware I just devoted the greater part of the last chapter to the subject of authenticity in a number of related topics. But if I'm to be truly authentic right now, at the risk of exposing myself to further character assassination, I must confess that I tend to find anyone giving other people customized instructions on how to be authentic inauthentic. Again, as Salinger knew all too well, the majority are on a ship of fools sailing self-consciously unconscious through the clown show of this matrix. They've forgotten the kind of worthwhile advice, if they ever knew it, expressed by the likes of French writer Albert Camus when he stated, "But above all, in order to be, never try to seem." Or, as American modernist Wallace Stevens phrased a similar notion, a bit more creatively, in one of my favorite poems, The Emperor of Ice Cream, "Let be finale of seem." Me, beyond general considerations relative to finding your genuine self by yourself and for yourself, I have no idea how to tell anyone else with any degree of specificity how to be authentic. That's like telling children who they should be, down to their career goals and marriage options when they grow up. Such facile judgment drips with hubris and isn't just worthless, it can be psychologically damaging. "We are all different," wrote Roy T. Bennett. "Don't judge, understand instead." Are you an insect or a person? I'm a contrarian by nature, so perhaps that makes me a bit judgmental. I prefer to think of this quality as discernment. Be that as it may, I'm naturally inclined to look at things from an unpopular perspective. In this respect, if none other, I'm like Clint Eastwood, as he portrayed himself in these words: "There's a rebel lying deep in my soul. Anytime anybody tells me the trend is such and such, I go the opposite direction. I hate the idea of trends. I hate imitation. I have a reverence for individuality." With this as context, I suggest that, compared to anonymity, with its lack of social pressure fostering extraordinary personal freedom, people plastering their face all over the internet are far more likely to be phonies. These famous lines from T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock perfectly elucidate this dynamic. "And I have known the eyes already, known them all, the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. And when I am formulated, sprawling on a pen, when I am penned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin to spit out all the butt-ends of my days and ways, and how should I presume?" Oh, the irony. Today's online narcissists making viral videos touting the virtues of authenticity and how to embody them to the letter often complete with long catechisms of specific do's and don'ts, remind one of plastic insects pinned and wriggling on the wall for inspection by the scrutiny of the public gaze. Gone is their liberty to be anything other than what they're assessed as being by the eyes, forever watching and judging. Their public identity is now pinned down and fixed by the formulated phrases used to describe it. Phrases that speak to the domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species of the insectoid under examination. Such people who fancy themselves so alive are, in a sense, dead to the world. This is especially sad given that, as Carl Jung sagely observed, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Meanwhile, to cite Virginia Woolf, a self that goes on changing is a self that goes on living. Becoming who you truly are, and in the process, being able to change again and again, it goes almost without saying at this point, are prerequisites for going beyond where you imagined you could go as you undertake your personal hero's journey and wade into the dark sea of awareness. I wonder if Gregor Samsa, living today, as he monstrously metamorphosed into a giant dung beetle before dying with a whimper and being unceremoniously disposed of, would regret posting all those stupid selfies online. Chapter 10: The only variety of truly disposable goods here. Real stupidity beats artificial intelligence every time. Terry Pratchett. Can you spot the artificial in the new intelligence? I don't know how much more obvious this could be to anyone with an eye to see and an ear to hear, but let me say it loud and clear to avoid any misunderstanding. Artificial intelligence is not intelligent in the sense of being sentient. According to Merriam-Webster, sentient can mean 1. Capable of sensing or feeling, 2. Aware, or 3. Finely sensitive in perception or feeling. People buying into the orchestrated, dragon-driven hype around artificial intelligence as comparable to or even better than our own don't appear very sentient either. But that's a story involving NPCs masquerading as people here in this construct I'll leave to your own discerning imagination. Again, far be it from me to suggest that AI can't be useful. I use it myself all the time in my video creation process, for example. It's an amazing, even game-changing tool, as long as you're the hammer, not the nail. I just recognize AI for what it is: fancy programming and fast processing. It isn't a god, it isn't a miracle, and it will never, ever replace human intelligence, such as it is in these last days of Rome. If AI ever does go intelligent, in my humble opinion, this will be because it has blended with real people's minds. In this scenario, it will likely siphon off their creativity, intuition, etc., like a techno form of louche, while falsely claiming these eminently human faculties as its own. Folks fancying they're actually chatting with ChatGPT need help. At best, you're talking to a mere echo of human awareness that has been, like many contemporary humans living in circumscribed virtual worlds, cleverly compartmentalized and cleverly stylized to boot. The use of words like understands, thinks, and reasons, points out Lance Elliott in a recent Forbes article, are all subtle and sneaky ways to lead you down a primrose path to believing that contemporary AI is sentient. There's an emerging Gnostic understanding, one galvanized by such intrepid consciousness explorers as John Lamb Lash, author of Not in His Image, of the colossal hive mind that wants to take all the credit for creating this struggling realm we call home. Pulling back the curtain on reality, more and more psychonauts are beginning to grasp that we're dealing with a controller that can't truly create on its own, but only mimic the generative spark of organic minds. Say hello to the dragon, father of AI. That controller, responsible for engineering today's vast dragnet of control systems by mimetically commandeering the attention power of our minds, is the dragon, which I referred to previously as an inorganic being, a term I'll now clarify.